Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Iron Canon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and more, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I'm coming from the Underworld North Studio here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, back home in the Great White North. And as always, I'm joined across the continent by your friend and mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing good. It is a little warm and dry outside, but we're keeping hydrated as best we can.
There you go. That makes one of us. That makes one of us. It's not warm. It's not dry. That's okay. This week we are going even back. I mentioned beyond the High Republic. We're going back before the High Republic to glimpse at what we have of the Old Republic in current canon. Speculation about new publishing initiatives will ensue, might ensue, will ensue. I will ensue them. First off, get the plugs out of the way. Get the cat out of the way. All good. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram and Threads at Ion Cannon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. I mean, don't really follow us on Threads. You can if you want. There's nothing there on Threads. I don't know if that platform really worked out. Here on the Underworld YouTube channel, we got super chats, we got YouTube memberships. As always, in all these platforms, check in the comments below. And if you chime in, we will get to them as best we can. If you chime in with a super chat, we will definitely get to them as soon as we can. So thanks for all your support there. Joel, talk to us about the Discord.
Yes, the Star Wars Underworld Discord, as usual, is always filled with activity, lots of fun, always good stuff. Last week we had a fun. Oh, here comes my cat again. We had a fun movie night. We showed the Phineas and Ferb Star Wars
Nice.
special, which was made, I think, during the sale. I always forget if that was pre or post sale, but no, I think it was after the sale.
Mhm.
Like one of the earlier things. Lots of fun, very funny. Basically, think of it as the Family Guy Star Wars specials, but PG for kids. But with enough of that sort of
Yes.
humor.
Still
Um,
fun. Okay, that's good to know.
yeah.
Yeah.
We're just a little less vulgar. But yeah,
Mhm.
that's a lot of fun. I don't know what we're gonna do. We're not gonna do anything this week, but we might do something next week. We might do another Fortnite run. Um, and we might. I don't know what Ben planned for this Thursday, or who knows. We could talk about that. But we do every now and then have little get-togethers. Whether or not this one happened this week, we will find out.
And also just to say, text chatting, just comments and this and the other. You guys have done a great job. Just about every day, asking, "Hey, audience, what's happening? What are you liking Star Wars?" If you have a thought, if you have a Star Wars thought, on any kind of topic, jump in there. The link is below in the description. Just jump in there, and yeah, Joel. I'm sure Joel will chime in, and Ben
Oh
will
yeah.
probably chime in, and I might chime in if it's a good canon question. If I can figure it out off the top of my head. Yeah, or a theology time question or a Canadian politics question. There we go. Or Taylor Swift question. There we go. Can chime in on the Discord there. Before we go to that, I'm gonna do my little plug for the Tractor Beam right here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel and all related socials. Yeah, every week, Thursday, 12:15 p.m. Eastern time. 9:15 a.m. Pacific. Sorry, get my noggin all going here. There we go. 9:15 a.m. Eastern Pacific time. Chris Abbott and I, Star Raptor himself, we review the comics that come out the day before. This coming week is going to be a little different. There's going to be two comics: is the Star Wars number 40 and Hyperspace Stories number 10, featuring the Bad Batch. By the way, that's going to be pretty fun. Also, we're going to talk about the Star Wars Insider short story set after Return of the Jedi in the latest Insider. So check that out right here on the on the channel. 12:15 p.m. Pacific, 12:15 p.m. Eastern. Get this right, Matthew. 12:15 p.m. Eastern, 9:15 a.m. Pacific. Bring your lunch if you're in Eastern. Bring your breakfast if you're in Pacific. It's fine. Speaking of which, also just this last Friday, Chris and I sat down to talk all about Phase 2 of the High Republic. That is over on his channel, Star Raptor. Check that out. We dove in. I was able to give my 2 cents on why Marta is so fantastic, why the Path of the Open Hand are so fantastic, and just bring in a little bit of real world influences there. So it was a really great discussion. So check that out over on Star Raptor's channel. Yeah, that's it for plugs. Joel, how's your week in Star Wars? What have you been thinking about these days?
Um, okay, so this was based off of. Oh, I was thinking about something that was. So this was based off a friend's video. They like to make YouTube videos about random things, and they're Star Wars and a Star Trek fan.
Right.
And one of their questions was, what would happen if Thrawn found himself in the Star Trek universe? I would say Star Wars. He's already in the Star
What would happen if he found himself in Star Wars? Now that's a good start.
Yes. Well, what would happen if he found himself in Star Trek? His whole shtick, if you go by the books,
Yeah.
is basically, protect the Chiss ascendancy and ally with the most powerful force.
Mhm.
And it's like, would he? Oop, that microphone.
No,
that
keep going. I'm just playing with getting this cord out of the way here.
Okay. So I was asking myself, like, would Thrawn have joined the Federation if it like he entered during like a good point of the Federation's, peacetime, whatnot, because people always said, oh, Thrawn's always felt like a Star Trek character. That would have been an interesting question for sure. But here's the thing about Thrawn and whether or not he would join the Federation or not. And here's a quote by the man himself, courtesy of my fellow Twitter Star Wars fan, Mr. Corey loses his data pad at the Tapcaf transmissions. I think this is from the 2017 Thrawn novel. I think it's from one of the newer ones. I don't remember.
Probably.
It's definitely from Thrawn quote. So here's what Thrawn has to say about an organization like the Federation. He's not really talking about the Federation, but yeah. So here we go. Multiple species with multiple viewpoints and racial philosophies simply cannot hold power together for long. There must be a dominant voice, or there is only chaos in this part of the galaxy. That voice is the Empire. That's yeah. I don't think Thrawn really likes democracy that much, or has no value in it. Even if it's not, even if it were a strong democracy like the Federation, which is why I kind of my response to that video was, I feel like Thrawn would join the Dominion the minute they showed up. It's like, yeah, Dominion, you guys are the right team. Go full on gold card on everybody. But yeah, so I was sort of this is my Star Wars and Star Trek thought of the week of like, well, is Thrawn just a fascist, or is he just the circumstances have made him join the Empire? And I think that quote to me said, no, he's a fascist. He doesn't care about democracy. He's a Chiss fascist, Chiss supremacy.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought experiment. I'll say that, and it comes out of the fact that in the novels, the Imperial Starfleet feels a lot like the Federation Starfleet in its organization, even in its first contact protocol, and similar kinds of questions that Star Trek often brings up. And how do we encounter different species, and what do we do? How do we have a military structure that, at least in the canon novels, sort of are in their case, the Empire really, I mean, some Imperials really believe that they're promoting the common good of security and stability in the galaxy.
Law and order.
Law and order, in a similar way that the Federation kind of does. And what if that? So it comes out of that. To extend it, to take it a step further, I kind of see where he's getting at. I mean, I wouldn't say he's a fascist. I do think there is more. He is more, kind of able to navigate different species and different ways of being. But yeah, I mean, he definitely is Chiss first. Chiss ascendancy first, like America first. Make the Chiss ascendancy great again, kind of thing. But yeah, he sees that the Empire is the best bet for that, and that's clearly what he's on about. Would he, and so yeah, no, I get where that's coming from. I wonder though, and here's the question: is would he have seen the Federation as just the best bet, and would he have said, okay, I don't personally believe in this, but I need their Starfleet. I see all these. I've watched TNG. I've watched DS9. I know how great these guys are. I know how they can push back this ominous force. I've seen Voyager. I've seen First Contact. I know how to push back the Borg. Then they can push back the Borg. Can they push back the Grisk as well? And so
I feel like again, I still
maybe
love
let me
the
just get
okay,
the thought in there.
okay, okay.
Maybe he'd say for that reason, tactically, just accept a democratic system for the moment. The way I mean, he's able to work with the Republic. You know, when he encounters Anakin on Batu, you know, he's able to see, okay, what are they up to? What are they on about? Um, you know, it's the you know this. Yeah, this quote though. I mean, funny is this quote doesn't quite stick out to my mind. I'm sure it's there. You know, that voice is the Empire. Yeah, I mean, what he kind of talking about is hegemony there, not so much. And the thing about hegemony, and by hegemony I mean, you know, what is the like for example, here in North America, in the West, we're in something called a liberal hegemony, in that liberal democracy is the prevailing, and capitalism and representative democracy is the prevailing regime, even if there are other alternatives that could potentially work. The reason, you know, there's a reason there's no, you know, the Socialist Party in the US doesn't do anything, can't do anything. There's a reason. Um, yeah, you know, there's a reason. You know, the NDP here in Canada, they continue to move to the right. There's a reason why.
Unfortunately,
Yeah,
unfortunately,
unfortunately, and even just, you know, here in Ontario, that got dicey. There's a reason why. Uh, why the Republicans moving to the right is so scary, is because that hegemony is being challenged by voices that we thought we had left behind 70, 80 years ago. Turns out we can't really ever leave those voices behind. We actually have to deal with them whenever they come up. We have to deal with these views that want one dominant voice over and against everyone else. And yeah, and that's the thing. You know, Churchill famously said, "Liberal democracy, or democracy, is the worst system except for all the rest." And so, yeah, it's a question of. I think for Thrawn, the point in this is he just joined whatever the hegemonic power is. Yeah, it could be the Federation, but not be. But that's where my mind is going with that. I don't know if you have any response to that.
I mean, first of all, we have to. We have to be. I mean, with this thought experiment, I want to be a little cautious of
Yeah.
like Thrawn saw TNG. It's not like he could put on the DVD and put
I
on
know
Netflix.
I'm being cheeky there. You know what I mean. You know what
You
I
know,
mean.
it's like that's why I'm still like, when the Dominion shows up, does he turn coattail or you know, it's like
Yeah.
Gold Dukat did. So that's sort of my that is sort of my does he make that calculation?
Yeah.
Especially from like the Deep Space Nine thing. Where at least with I mean with God, it was I mean it's kind of the same thing really. Just
Hmm.
oh yeah, so yeah. Although this quote itself actually was because the oh, forget it. I'm gonna say it. It was the whole kind of Thrawn's last line in Ahsoka of him saying,
Yeah.
"Long live the Empire." Like everyone's kind of going, "Oh, "What do you say, David? Can you do it?" And it's like, well,
Mhm.
from just that standpoint, it's Filoni's going with the traditional Thrawn of he's a blue Grand Admiral who's about restoring the Empire, which was
Mhm.
his MO in the original books. Um, but again, if you wanna but I think he was using this the guy, Corey Datapad was using this
Mhm.
quote to, like, use book knowledge to go with the fact that, yes, Thrawn is in for the Empire.
Yeah.
Even though the New Republic is now the dominant hegemon of the galaxy, he's still siding with the broken Imperial
Yeah.
remnant because he still thinks at the end of the day that system of governance is the best one
I mean, even
for
that's iffy if the New Republic is actually a hegemonic power at this point. But yeah,
in Legends, well, it's like
sure.
it
Yeah, that's
probably
true.
was as well. So
I mean, it also gets at I mean, this maybe maybe this is really it, because this is the age old question we've spent the last almost 2 years going back and forth on. Is Thrawn good guy? Is he a bad guy? Is he the hero? Is he the villain? Is he an anti-hero? Is he window dressing while Thalios and Aralani figure everything out? You know, and then he just swoops into the end, Agatha Christie style,
yeah.
Hercule Poirot style. Um, I mean, it's really. I wonder if it's really a question of here's content is the audience thing. Here we go, Marshall McLuhan. Do we want to cheer for Thrawn or not? Do we want to cheer for him, or do we want to do we want to cheer for the characters that he's opposing? And if we're talking about paper, yeah, we're kind of cheering for him. Again, I'm cheering for more for Thalius than anyone else. But on screen, which we'll get to in a second. In the stories we've been given, in Rebels, we're cheering Gates and we're cheering for the Ghost Crew. So yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I'm curious to know kind of the more thoughtful Thrawnies. Thrawnies tend to be fairly thoughtful out there, I think. Are they? Like, I mean, I got Vader here. I got, I mean, Vader for me, it's complicated. It's always Vader and Anakin, but I got the people who tracked down Ahsoka is my favorite trooper design, the Coruscant Guard. So I think they're really cool. I like them. We got this friggin' galactic vampire banner here. It's similar kind of thing.
True. If the Empire existed, would you wouldn't join it? We hope not.
No. Well,
Exactly.
again, what I was just saying is in the real world, it's terrifying, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a question of do we want to? I mean, also suspend our moral disbelief is another thing I talk about, right? Cheering for the bad guy. Yeah, but this is a fascinating way into that question, I think.
Yeah. I just think there is that. I mean, I'm sure there are thoughtful Thrawnies out there, but at the same time, it's like there are also just a lot of weirds. I don't want to say weird, but there's just a lot of people who are like very pro Thrawn's doing this for the greater good, the greater good. And again, to quote my buddy who I want to really have on the show because he's really cool.
Yeah.
Corey loses data pad, does his own Star Wars book podcast. So
Nice.
paper gotta respect paper.
Sure.
Podcasters out there. He said there is nothing that's forcing Thrawn to join the Empire to save the Chiss ascendancy from greater evils. Like that's not like it's not like Thrawn doesn't have any other options. He
What's this? There's nothing forcing Thrawn to join the Empire in order to save the Chiss.
Yeah, it's like being fascist does not mean save the Chiss. It might be it's sort of like Thrawn might be doing the easy thing, but is it really the right thing?
Right. And I mean, and that's the thing with I only remember like halfway through Lesser Evil, it's the was it Thurfian and Distalmu who are all what's this guy doing? Why is he being so militaristic? Why is he risking open warfare? And they're considered the antagonists of the story because they're promoting peace, and Thrawn wants to have preemptive strike. Which I mean, there's an interesting that's an interesting question in Star Wars, even in High Republic. Thinking about Creed, thinking about Vern, Navar, but I mean, what does Zahn say? I guess is the thing is, and what does Zahn think? Because that's the thing. The Federation, they actually care about these things called Geneva or the similar things like Geneva Conventions. They actually care about those things, which I don't think Thrawn definitely wouldn't. Really, I mean, Thrawn breaks the
He's
Chiss version of the
using
Geneva
space zombies and dark magic now, so
Yeah, that's true too. Speaking of which, well, we'll get to that in a minute.
But yeah, that's my thoughts. I just wanted to have this fun little thought experiment as a Star Trek and Star Wars fan. Kind of
for sure, and we've gone back and forth. We've done that a lot. I should sneak a Star Trek toy in here sometime. That'd be fun. I mean, April 1st, we did the whole Star Trek Overworld. That was fun. My this week in Star Wars, I'm almost done Tales of Light and Life. Finally, I'm almost caught up. Caught up to High Republic. I will, but certainly by the time, I think by the time Shadows of Starlight #2 comes out, I will have caught up. And so on the tractor beam, we haven't done Shadows of Starlight yet. We aren't doing the High Republic short story and Insider yet because I'm not caught up yet. So we're getting there. I'm almost done. It's really fascinating. Just a lot of, so the way they can tell, just talking about this book, Tales of Light and Life, the way they can tell these stories that move these characters forward. It is actually really satisfying in a way that they say what's next with these characters, even if they aren't necessarily consequential to, I mean, especially with the phase 2 stories. Well, the first phase 2 stories about Axel, the second one about Marta, about grandma and grandpa. That's all I'll say. That was really consequential. But the way they can tell, stories we're used to, and I talk about how paper is good at taking time. But these ones, they don't have them. They're 30 pages, and they tell very full, satisfying stories. Some things are a little rushed and confusing, but overall, I'm really appreciating the way they've used this, especially. Well, they've used this to really dig in even deeper to these characters. It underlies it's a YA anthology with all the younger characters.
Mhm.
Even Axel's story again. It's Axel, frat boy Axel, and he's in college. Uh, and so it's him at a younger age than we're used to seeing. Yeah, it just underlies how these younger characters are the main characters of the High Republic, and they're going to do a lot more. I think they're going to do even more in Phase 3 because of what we've seen. Even Affy and the crew of the vessel. I'm wondering, is there, because they've seemed a little bit off to the side. This is actually this their story really brings Affy and Leox and Geode really brings them, I think, into the center in a lot of ways. And so that, and then Vernestra, I was surprised that Vern, it makes sense, and I won't spoil anything, but the way she's affected by, I was surprised, but now that I see the way she's affected by the fall of Starlight, spoiler alert, Starlight Beacon crashes into Iron. Just that's at the end of phase one.
It's been a few years. I think they know that Starlight Beacon.
Just
So
like
come
Disney, the fallen star.
on.
But the way Vanessa was affected by that, I always thought she was the one to want to be out there, like I was saying with Ron, right? Someone who wants to be proactive and take the fight to the Nile, and thinks the Jedi shouldn't be holding back.
Mhm.
Avar also, as an older character, wants to take the fight to the Nile. After the fall of Starlight, they've been affected by that, and
Mhm.
they've been pushed into themselves a little bit more. And so the one thing I'll say at the very beginning is that Vern becomes a way seeker, and I did not see that coming. I did not see that coming. So
Is
really
this? Would
so
you
good.
say? I'm gonna have a question.
Yeah.
Is this book? Would you say this book would be recommended to understand what's gonna go on in Phase 3?
I suspect so. Yeah, I suspect it's really, especially all the, because it does a little bit with, oh no, even I think even the Marta story
Oh,
might have a lot to say about Phase 3. Just in showing, I mean, everything about Marta is about going behind the curtain of what the Nile are to what they really are, and the way that the most calloused, violent faction is actually the most hurting and the most
mhm,
tender and
mhm,
soft, and just I mean, the way, I mean, that's kind of the ever any story is, and the story with a lot of, I mean, on a personal level, on a socio-political level. um I don't want to get to too much contemporary politics, but the sabra is a Middle Eastern fruit, and it it's very hard and prickly on the outside
mhm,
because it's very soft and vulnerable on the inside. And uh we put up these defenses, and we make these factions, we put up the storm wall. I'm wondering, it's making me wonder if the key to defeating the Nile isn't through vinegar, it's through honey. That's just
mhm,
where this book is leading me. So yeah, I mean, it was very intentional that they said this YA anthology of short stories, really, yeah, setting up the way, I mean, because it's what I'm used to, is they're able to set up these through lines through the different
ooh,
phases, but certainly through the different
yes,
waves
some of that.
of a phase. And so looking forward to how they, all these authors, I keep saying this because it's true, they are masters of setup and payoff, and I'm really looking forward to even what they have here paying off. So yes, definitely recommend it. The thing with High Republic is, you can jump in. Hopefully there'll be things that will refer back, or things that are maybe even, like, say, pick up and repeat the theme or the idea behind the story. But if you want to read the story itself, is that what I realized, I remembered, they're really stretching this out, so you have more time. The first novel comes out mid-November. The comic will come out monthly, but the first novel comes out mid-November. It's Eye of the Storm by George Mann. Then the next novel doesn't come out, I think, until January. So you have more time. I have more time to catch up and stay caught up. Let's hope. Let's hope. I don't know if you have any response to that or anything to say.
Nope, I'm
Right.
good.
So we did talk about. We mentioned the show. We mentioned a bit of it. I think the reason we're being a little iffy, Lucy, I don't know about it, is there a strike update? Is there something moving? Joel, if you want to just go ahead and just say kind of what
So
is.
yes, it does seem negotiations are continuing apace. It does seem they are happening every day. There's a lot of rumors and outlines and whatnot. It does seem
Mhm,
like the lawyers are coming in to like make sure all the P's and Q's are there and there are no loopholes
mhm,
to exploit, which is important.
yeah,
But I would say, just by the people I trust and the people that sounds like a general outline for an agreement has more or less maybe been agreed to, and now it's just a matter of jotting it all down. I
mhm,
mean, everything could. I mean, you never know. There could be a last minute curveball explosion. We
yeah,
don't know. I don't want to. But it does seem like at least we are in a place where things are moving. It's not just studios. Because remember, one of the reasons that this has taken a long time is because the studios just weren't negotiating. They weren't. There wasn't even talks. It
right,
was just no one's talking. Um. So just strikers and studios, and no one's talking. Now they've been talking. Now lawyers are around. Now they're on a table. So they're having meetings that are lasting a long time. It's mostly been quiet. So it does seem like something might be happening hopefully
yeah,
soon. We can only pray. Pray to your force gods. Um but yeah,
yeah,
and hopefully this all ends soon, depending on how long the little ifs and buts of getting the wording down and
yeah.
whatnot, which that's important. But yeah, so just keep an eye on things, and I'll be curious to see what happens tomorrow.
Keep an eye on things. From what I read, it was something like how the actors were like 10%, and then the studios were like 8%, and so they're going to be 9%. It's gonna meet in the middle, and something like that. And so
And a lot of
yeah,
AI stuff too. It's a lot of it.
yeah, and how to deal with that, because I mean, the thing is, AI is here to stay. So how
Right.
do we, how do we,
Make sure you're not getting screwed by it.
yeah, like how do we navigate all that? Yeah, and so I mean, well, we still have this up. This is still happening. We're still not doing an actual eyes on screen just yet, but maybe next week. You never know. We'll see what happens. So yeah, that's the yeah. I think was there something else I wanted to say about that? I forget. I don't know. If it comes back to me, it'll come back to me. Anyway, main topic. What we all came here for. And before I throw it to you, Joel, I want to preface this just a little behind the scenes. After the show, usually Joel and I chat for a little bit. Um, and it's kind of one of those things where once the pressure of just giving, doing content on the internet was done, then the creativity can flow a little better sometimes. But we during the discussion last week, we talked about what the next publishing initiative would be. Talking about New York Comic Con and all that. And I was all, there's been some mentions of the Old Republic in canon. I'm still wondering, if there's something there, especially if we'll talk about why I think that later on. But just in terms of when the films are potentially set and what when the High Republic is set and things like that. And so, well, let's just look at what do we have? What do we have so far of what the Old Republic is, and we'll define what the Old Republic is and when that is in a minute. Um, we do know, just throwing this out here, Tessa Gratton, Charles Soule, and others, they were in Galaxy's Edge, and probably Disney and some other offices or whatever, for what Tessa Gratton on her Instagram is calling High Republic shenanigans, which is interesting to me. So I had the thought, I figure, they've made all these announcements for phase 3. They've plotted it all. I figure they've plotted it all out. They have an idea. So I'm curious as to what more they have to talk about. And I'm sure they have more to talk about and more to sort out. And maybe just to get together and just to make sure everyone's on the literal same page, and literally and otherwise. But what if they're starting to see and hatch a plan for something, and that might be the Old Republic. It might be something completely different. Again, we'll get it to the end about what I think and what Joel doesn't think, and this, that, and the other. But yeah, that's kind of where this comes from. Is for me at least, just curious, but also it's interesting. This is a very sparse, unexplored period of time. It's only been in references and flashbacks, and characters saying it's only been backstory. It's only been backstory that served main story. And so, like good nerds we are, we're gonna say, okay, that's fine, that's great, serving main story, but what do we got? What do we, because the story group still has to make sure things sort of line up as best they can. So, sorry, diaphragm, Matthew. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Joel. What is the Old Republic?
For 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights have been the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic for the dark times. Or the Empire. Okay, I had to say that line. Okay, so but that's actually interesting. So the I want to kind of go like a little bit into like the behind the scenes of like this term, because it's a really kind of bizarre kind of way this all kind of came together. All right, so when Obi-Wan makes that statement in A New Hope, and then later Tarkin says, the last remnants of the Old Republic have been swept away. They're referring to the prequel Republic. They're referring to the Republic that we know.
What I call the late Republic.
Yeah, but that's what they're referring to. It's called the Galactic Republic, really. And that was sort of the idea of what the Republic was, going back to things like the Tales of the Jedi comics from the 90s that goes like 5,000 years into the past, and the ancient Jedi versus Sith wars of old. This changes somewhat in the mid 2000s when they're writing the Darth Bane book, and the idea is that last war was so bad and so wild that essentially the Republic reinvents itself. It's the Old Republic is now referring to a different republic, and
different
then
regime, we could say.
Different regime, different constitution, even maybe you can argue. And then the Galactic Republic is Republic number 2. So that is and then Clone Wars kind of cements this a little bit when although I'm not quite sure what Plo Koon really said with like when he said, I haven't heard of battles like this since the days of the Old Republic. I don't remember what episode that was in. That was like one of the Camino episodes. I don't remember. But he said that somewhere. I think it's even like one of the earlier seasons too.
We'll ask Ben to come up and help us.
Yeah. So basically, Star Wars, from a canon perspective, basically has had 3 republics so far: the Old Republic, the Galactic Republic, and now the New Republic. And that's just canon. In Legends, there's like 5 republics.
Sure. I mean, France, there's also 5. So
that's true, and a couple monarchies in between. But yeah, so that is sort of the weirdo history of the term Old Republic, where originally it probably meant the prequel Republic that we all know, and then just one continuous thing. And then they kind of weirdly split it into like, okay, here's the Old Republic regime, which is Republic 1. The Republic 2 is the Galactic Republic, which is the one we know from the prequels and the High Republic and all that good stuff. So that is the behind the scenes version of the term. Do you want to say something before I continue?
Yeah, so it's interesting just thinking about how it serves the story at hand. In A New Hope, it serves as this thing that was before. This thing, we're like the George Lucas thing, we're coming in the middle of the story, because the Buck Rogers in the middle of the thing. This was how it was, and there was this something that Obi-Wan says was actually a good thing, and then Tarkin says it was this forgettable thing. Let's get rid of it. The last vestiges of being swept away. Thank God. Thank the Force. And Obi-Wan's all, in the days of the Republic, when the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy.
When I was young and cool.
It serves as it serves to show to say how dire things are, how bad things are now, and how there is the galaxy does need saving now to restore. I mean, an alliance to restore the Republic.
Mhm.
We can get to, or of course, alliance to do something new. You know, the spark that'll bring restore the Republic, or the spark that will bring the First Order. You know, both between Holdo and Poe there. And so yeah, it definitely serves that function. And then with the prequels, it still sort of serves that function, because here's the thing with the prequels, it's also saying things are just as bad, even if there is technically elections and freedom of speech and whatnot, freedom of enterprise. Things are still bad. It's interesting, of course. They're bad for the same reason that they're bad with in time of the Galactic Empire, time of the Empire, is because the Sith are taking control and consolidating power in Coruscant, and everything we read about and see in the Clone Wars and in Darth Plagueis, for example, Legends, and um, everything we know and love about the prequels is the way that shows that the Republic, the late Republic, as Maul says, in Siege of Mandalore arc, it's already been done. It's already been done for a while, and so yeah, that's the thing is, okay, then they have to push it back even further and say there was actually a golden age. There was actually a time where things were not that bad. And that's kind of what I mean, it's what the old Republic sort of refers to, in that there was this time where things were that bad, and then something, it came to a breaking point, and then there was a saving moment. And in Legends called it the Rasan Reformation, which I think maybe you might be going into. And
Yes.
there's a canon version of that we don't know about yet, but something about the same time, right after Darth Bane, and well, with Darth Bane going into hiding. And yeah, and it's fascinating. I mean, High Republic sort of takes that mantle in a way. I mean, for the High Republic, the Old Republic has a different function. It's actually almost the opposite function, in that there's not so much the opposite. I mean, I do like your theory and how there something kind of happened to
We'll get to that. I
dissolve the
have proof.
galaxy.
I got
Yeah,
I got proof of
sure.
this.
So it's interesting just to see and to think about, what function does the Old Republic have in storytelling. I mean, one thing we'll get to later is that the Old Republic actually is when the Sith were doing their business, and not so great. So I mean, that goes to show, you know, there's no such thing as a golden age. History is always ebbing and flowing, and there's always like Maz, the Sith, the Empire, not the First Order. It's always, so that's why I'm excited to see them actually show stories about this, and dive into what that means. So yeah,
Right.
those are my thoughts there.
So yeah, as I said, in both Legends and canon, the Old Republic's kind of retroactively meaning before the prequel era Republic. In
Yeah,
some way, I don't know why that decision was honestly made. That was always sort of a weird one for me.
like
But
the as in like before, like 1,000 year before.
yeah, like the thousand year mark, and then technically the Old Republic is now the Galactic Republic
Yeah.
because of the Rusan Reformations, and I guess technically they're two different things because of how apparently
Mhm.
in Legends the Old Republic was set up very differently. Like Core Worlds had like more votes than
Yeah.
early worlds, and the Jedi chancellors and whatnot. It was just kind of lumping together a whole bunch of
Yeah.
history.
That's true.
Um,
We're talking about swaths of time anyway. So
and
speaking of swaths of time,
and even Wikipedia itself, it's like, well, are they the same thing technically? But yeah, so yeah. Anyway, yeah, and this was obviously, as you said, the time period
mhm.
of when the this. Well, actually, and you know what? I'm actually going to decide. I'm going to share my proof now. Sorry
Yeah.
for the little
Well,
overload.
I will say one last thing then is the word old
Mhm.
is nice and vague. You can say like High Republic, we know what that means. We've been given what that means. We don't know exactly kind of what historians in the time of the Empire would say, or in the time of the late Republic would say. I'd be curious to see, ask Padawan Dooku and Padawan Sifo what they've been taught in their history class, that their professors telling them, their teachers are telling them. This is when the High Republic era was, like we say, when the Renaissance era was, right? But
It's
yeah,
It's interesting, at least from looking at Wikipedia, that they at least somewhat consider the Old Republic and Galactic Republic the same thing. It's just this is like a time period. It's like
yeah,
I watched an interesting video, not to get too tangency about like Rome and like periodizing Rome. It's
yeah,
like when do you like put the epochs and whatnot? So
yeah.
it's like
That's the question.
is like I guess the question is, are the Old Republic and Galactic Republic of the prequels the same thing? And then I just begs the question, well, is the New Republic the same thing as well? And like, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It's
Yeah.
like, are the French republics the same thing? I
I
don't
mean,
know.
you're gonna get successor states because
Yeah,
technically, I mean, the Galactic Empire is a successor state to the Republic.
it's
Yeah,
confused. It's weird. It's
yeah.
confusing. But I'm going to use. Oh wait, this isn't the cover. This
There
is
we
the
go.
cover. I'm going
Get
to
your prop.
use
Oh, there we go.
Star Wars
Oh, I love that book. I
Propaganda
have that symbol here.
by Pablo Hidalgo to
Yeah.
kind of read out one of the earliest mentions of the Old Republic. So
Hmm.
hang on. Story time,
There
children.
you go.
Okay, here we go. So we begin here the chapter, the last era of peace. During the height, can you hear me?
Yes.
During the height of the Galactic Republic, the specter of widespread warfare had been forgotten. A full-scale war had not rocked the galaxy in centuries. The last great conflict having been waged for the soul of civilization itself was a decisive war fought between the Jedi Order and the Sith Lords. The Republic victory was so definitive that it reinvented itself, resettling its capital on Coruscant after a devastating ouster. History set in its chrono on this date, and from that moment, the modern Galactic Republic was born. Societal memories and official calendars started fresh, and the time before this rebirth was forgotten as a dark age, lumped into a collective whole known as the Old Republic.
Okay.
This was not to say there were isolated conflicts in this new era. With any society, there are failures of diplomacy and communication that can be resolved only within canon and carnage. They were blessed few, and many were quelled in their earliest stages by the earnest pursuit of peace by the Jedi Order. Jedi negotiators settled disputes before they inflamed war. The Jedi Code itself evolved to include provisions that would keep the Jedi Knights apart from such conflicts. The Jedi were keepers of the peace, not soldiers. As such, the Jedi were rarely viewed as warriors, and their face did not adorn message of propaganda.
Hmm.
Okay, so there is like the first big mention of the Old Republic in the canon, or at least of like certainly of something very official. So, what are your just thoughts on that, Matthew? As my little read.
Yet it makes me wonder. Are we talking about something like? Because my mind goes Old Republic for some reason. My mind goes like 1,000 to maybe 500 to 200. What? Not 380, but 1,000 to maybe 400. You're saying like 50,000, 5,000 to 1,000, and then
Official,
just yeah,
officially, the old. Okay, so
yeah,
according to Star Wars timeline, and I have the. We're gonna use the Star Wars timelines.
yeah.
Let's see. Old Republic
Mhm.
era canon. Okay, so according to the new Star Wars timeline, which is
Yeah.
also in the Star Wars timeline book, the Old Republic, at least roughly, although I think they changed this a little bit in the book, is like 25,000 BBY to 1,000 BBY.
Okay.
I actually
Yeah.
think that might be different in canon. Let me just double check.
Like in stories, you mean? Because that's kind
Yeah.
of like I mean, it's an out of universe sort of publishing shorthand, but also, I mean, it makes me think. Okay, that's really, I mean, that's really kind of the era, the Dark Ages, this era of chaos, of Sith, and setting up
uh,
camp and doing the
Sorry,
business.
I want to just correct one more thing.
Good.
Sorry. So
Yeah.
okay, so the first era in the Star Wars timeline is Dawn of the Jedi, which is 25,000
Sure.
BBY. According to the timeline, the Old Republic era is 8,000 BBY to 1,000
Okay.
BBY.
So I mean, if anything, it says okay. So there's Sith Wars and maybe Mandalorian Wars, and then
A bunch of
real
stuff happened.
yeah, a whole bunch of stuff leading up to like leading up to what we know as the Galactic Republic. It goes from this one millennium, from 1,000 to well to 32 to 22, whatever it is, 19. whenever it is. You know what I mean? The Galactic Republic. So it's really the thing to say the Galactic Republic is it's tricky. I'm trying to square the circle here because I mean we want to say the High Republic and the High Republic really kind of almost throws a wrench into this whole thing because it's like the Galactic Republic is the thing that was so great that was lost. I think something to do with the Nile, but I mean the thing that Obi-Wan is referring to is the Galactic Republic when things were actually peaceable and good. There's this thing before it that was chaotic and was wild. Now that's tough because I mean this is a whole swath of history. This is
I could help break it down a little bit more
yeah,
before to help
sure.
kind of get your maybe
I
help
mean you
square the
have this
circle.
thing this brief history of the era.
Okay,
You want to
so
jump to
yeah,
that?
yeah. So okay, so I have to add a few things because I didn't put it down. So okay, so the Republic, the Republic as we know it, where it's like eventually where a bunch of people came together and formed a Senate.
Yes.
According to the timeline, that started around the same time of the Jedi, which was 25,000 BBY.
Okay.
These dates will get a little ridiculous, but this is what they want to go for. So
Again,
okay.
it's storytelling, fictional, but also long term. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
So more or less, the Jedi and the Republic kind of form around the same time, 25,000 BBY. Bunch of stuff happens, and then when by circa around 5,000 BBY before the Battle of Yavin, so before New Hope.
Yeah.
That is when the big split between some light side Jedi and some dark side Jedi happened. They clash. 100 years of darkness, apparently. They kept that from Legends. And then the Dark Jedi, they get booted out of the Jedi. We don't want your Darksiders in here, Jedi. And they go onto a little planet called Korriban, and they found a little thing we like to call the Sis. And then the Sis Empire is born. So, starting around that time, when the Sis Empire finally is formed, through 1,000 BBY, that is when a whole bunch of Jedi versus Sith wars happen, on and again, off again, Sith versus Jedi, all that good stuff. In Legends, there were like many of these. This is what the Great Hyperspace War, when the original Sith Empire fell, and the Exar Kun thing happened like 100 years later. Then the Revan thing happened like 100 years later. Then the Vichy stuff happened for like a couple hundred years later. And then eventually the Jedi schism began, and then the Sith organization that Darth Bane joined up with happened, and then finally, big battle. The Sith all but vanished, and except for one, a la Darth Bane, who decided, you know what, we're not gonna have a bunch of thousands of Sith. We're just gonna have two. We're gonna stick with two, and that's it. No more, no less. Master and Apprentice, and then at least in Legends, the Ruthon Reformations happened, where basically the Republic reinvents itself kind of from the ground up, and then the Galactic Republic that we know from the prequels and the High Republic come into play until the Clone Wars and then Sidious. And also there was some Mandalorian stuff that was going on as well.
Yeah.
But if we just kind of, minus the actual conflicts that I mentioned from Legends, basic things we know from canon are 5,000 BBY to 1,000 BBY. A whole bunch of Jedi versus Sith wars with some Mandalorian stuff thrown in the mix all happens. I don't know if it's like one big conflict or like several conflicts, and they just decide, you know what, we're gonna, for historic state, gonna squish it all together like the 100 Years' War or something.
Yeah.
And that's a whole bunch of wild stuff happened during this time period until it all just went kaboom, and then the Sith killed each other.
Yeah, which again we don't. So we here's the things we do have. We have Bane. Like we have this movement from the Sith being a formidable foe and formidable threat to the Jedi and the Republic, to them going into hiding and not being a formidable foe. We have the Sith basically being defeated, but then that leading to but not without price, and that's maybe the point is with this history is the Sith are able to rob the Republic of its soul. That sounds familiar, right? Rob the Republic of its soul, leading to this great cataclysm. I mean, I wonder if Malachor has something to do with that as well. And you've mentioned Malachor, how the Jedi have lost their soul in this moment.
I take a little disagreement with that.
Well, I
per
don't know.
se.
Maybe we don't know. But what my
But
point being is that there's some reason why they have to say we've been doing this all wrong, and it takes a massive cataclysm,
mhm,
social cataclysm, socio-political conflict to get a whole system to say, hold on, we've been doing this wrong. You know, I mean, here's the parallel is, and maybe you might disagree with this too, but the wild, aristocracy driven social inequality, not of the Weimar Republic, of the First Reich, all the way back,
German
probably,
Kaiserreich of the
I mean, probably going back to the Holy
Golden
Roman
Bismarck.
Empire, and that you can draw this line. You want to talk about actual fascism, right?
Mhm.
This line to say, I mean, we know with the Weimar Republic, the social instability, Hitler comes to power to say, I'm going to save everything, I'm going to make Germany great again. Um, you know, comes to power, but it's they're able to point to the divergences and inequalities as the thing that led to that happening, and so they say, hold on, it takes that level of shock to stop and reset and look back and say, hold on, we need to rethink all of this. And
I,
I and
I
I
got to
think,
counter. I want to counter because
well, I'm saying I think this
yeah,
might be what happens with the Republic here, at least what I
yeah.
hope that happens with the Republic.
My good.
I don't know if
Good.
we kind of had hoped COVID would do that a little bit. I mean, not
Well,
hope,
let's
but like the
yeah.
side effect, the silver lining.
Well, I want to bring
Uh,
up. I want to
good.
bring up something. Of when I was doing my Tale of the Jedi discussion, my buddy
Yeah.
Red he brought up a really good point, which I think
Mhm.
I would love to hear your thoughts on.
Yeah.
He said, at least in Legends, that the thing about the Jedi was they always because remember in Legends, and I think in canon, I think this is also true.
Yeah.
Jedi had many beatings. They got beaten down pretty hard a couple
Sure.
times, and he always said, and Red brought up a good point where he said the Jedi were always good at when they rebuilt themselves. They were always good at making sure that whatever killed them during the last conflict
Mhm.
wouldn't happen again. It's sort of
Yeah.
like they adapted to like almost like were preparing for the last war, which is sort
Mhm.
of like what happened in the real world. So it's like when when the Jedi and the Republic had their last big war with the Sith,
Mhm.
the one that Darth Bane was on, yeah, they did. I guess you're right. I mean, they did like, okay, well, we don't want this to happen again. We have to rebuild ourselves. We're not going to rebuild ourselves with like Jedi lords and kings anymore. 'Cause
Mhm.
that's what the Jedi were kind of. That's kind of what's going on because things were just getting bad. So we're going to rebuild ourselves to like we have closer relationship with the Republic and
Yeah.
working more in tandem and work with the judicial forces and the Republic going to be more egalitarian. So they prepped themselves for the last to make sure that whatever
Right.
happened during the last war happened. But then at the same time, the Sith were like, well, we got to adapt too to make sure that we can
Yeah.
kill the Republic another way. So,
I mean, it worked for 1,000 years.
hey, yeah, it worked for 1,000
You
years.
know?
So, it makes me wonder,
Maybe
like,
not. I mean, well, here's the thing with denial makes this interesting, right? Is they what happens then is then they get pushed back to Coruscant.
but
We,
they still last
because
for another 300 years.
they
So
did,
it has to
that's
win. They
true.
have to win. That's the thing. The Jedi have to
Yeah,
win.
that's it. Yeah, no. So that's
Um,
kind of what I'm getting at is
yeah.
they're able to respond, both the Jedi and the Republic, and that's another thing that's interesting. A theme from Legends that I think is probably going to come over is
Hmm.
that the fortunes of the Republic and the fortunes of the Jedi are intertwined in this kind of weird mystical way that doesn't really have, well, it had kind of a medieval parallel but doesn't have any parallel in our world anymore. um
Well,
I
Star
mean,
Wars is fantasy, medieval, but also
yeah,
modern.
and, I mean, kind of the way,
Yeah.
the way, this kind of, in the Middle Ages, Western Europe in the Middle Ages is this alliance
The
between altar and
samurai.
throne. Well, yeah, well, in the East, but in Western Europe, it's this alliance between altar and throne, and
Mm.
how they ideally ideally prop each other up for the sake of stability of society. Obviously, that that impetus doesn't last and doesn't really work out even in while it's happening, because who's stability, who's security, whatnot. But they're still, at least the point being, the two are intertwined. and that's
Mhm.
that's an interesting reminder for history. Is that yeah? I mean, it's a question, and I mean when I've talked about the New Republic as a secular republic, and it's me, I'm all for pluralist democracy here, but just to understand our own history in the West, right? That we weren't a pluralist democracy. For better and for worse, we had a common sense of as a society and of the sacred. Maybe there is a way to do that in a pluralist society. I hope there is actually, because which we need, and maybe that's what Ray is going to explore. Maybe that's, who knows, but
I actually
uh,
want to know what Luke did to screw up his Jedi Order. It's like, well, what
yeah,
lessons Rey need to learn to make sure that her Jedi Order can last longer?
sure. I'm just talking about the large scale thing, and to say, I mean, except for actually, Chris and I were talking about this about Jeddah. How Jeddah is a pluralist society. It has to be. They're all coming together, even though on Coruscant it isn't. And so it's interesting. I mean, I wonder, what's also interesting there. And this is actually just a tangent, but I'm thinking just in terms of the Republic itself, right? Jeddah at this time sort of exists outside the Republic. The Republic itself, I mean, this the Jedi. The Jedi are just the ones who are force sensitive. It's everyone who's kind of willing to work with the Jedi and work, to be in common cause with the Jedi, and that's the stability of the Republic depending on being in common cause with the Jedi. The stability of the Jedi being depending more and more increasingly, especially after the Nile, on being common cause with the Republic because they need for the mutual defense. And so, yeah, that's the striking thing about this history. Or
Yeah,
interesting thing.
I mean, the Republic and Jedi have always been hand in hand since, well, forever.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, I'm talking about the Galactic Republic more so, but yeah, I
Even
mean,
in
we can go
Legends,
back
the
to
Republic and the Jedi were the Elder even more. I would say in Legends than the
yeah,
Old Republic, Jedi and the Republic were more intertwined. They were Jedi Chancellors,
yeah,
exclusively Jedi Chancellors.
sure. I mean,
Um,
wasn't that only maybe one or two examples though? I
I
think.
mean, there was like a 1,000 years of Jedi
Really,
Chancellors.
really? I don't know. I thought there. That's
At least in Legend, I don't know in canon, but
yeah,
I mean, no, we don't know in canon.
yeah.
But yeah. So yeah, there were Jedi Chancellors. I think it's like that's from the MMO game,
No, maybe
uh,
yeah.
where that happens.
Hmm.
But yeah. So we got this period of history of various Jedi versus Sith wars, and then some Mandalorian stuff thrown in the mix.
Hmm.
Coruscant apparently gets captured a couple times by the Sith, and because they built that Sith shrine, which according to Tarkin was
Yeah,
5,000 years before New Hope. Um, so which then the Jedi put a temple on top of it.
yeah.
Plop. I would just think that's funny. And apparently they captured it again. Within 1,000 BBY, at least according to the timelines.
Really? So that I mean that also like the Sith captured Coruscant.
Yes, they captured
So
Coruscant.
that also goes to my point before about how this is a great disaster that leads to rethinking of whence the dust is settled.
Yeah,
If you put it
yeah.
that way. Yeah.
That's how it kind of went in Legends too. Although I don't think they captured Coruscant in Legends. Um, but
Mm.
yeah. So you're right.
That's an
You're right.
interesting
You're right.
little tidbit they just threw in there, right? Because there's nothing in story that suggests that, right?
No, I don't know. I've seen
Uh,
they say the fall of they got the fall of the old republic. Though somewhere they say
mhm,
that they capture Coruscant somewhere here.
yeah.
I don't know where. I don't know where.
Yeah.
Um there we go. Battle of Coruscant. Battle of Coruscant Jedi Sith Wars.
No,
This
that
was
battle, of course
mentioned
not.
in no, that's something else.
Okay.
Um but I swear somewhere they say Coruscant was taken.
I'll look it up. I have it on Kindle. I'll give it a look.
I
I
think
mean,
it's
there
in
are
the propaganda book at least or
yeah, maybe
somewhere,
that's
but
well, I mean, there are these morsels in canon of what the old Republic is. If you wanna
right. So yeah,
go
if
through.
there, but yes. So I mean, but one thing I've always been interested in is like, is it multiple Sith empires like in Legends where like the Sith fall for a little bit and then come back and they fall and come back, or it's like it's just
Right.
one big continuous thing? That's sort of interesting, a thought process of how
Yeah.
is it one big thing or is it like kind of lumping in 1,000 different conflicts and like this is all kind of semi-connected, right?
Yeah,
It'd
I
be
mean
like if you
they might do it just to simplify things.
It'd be like if we
So,
lumped in World War One and World War Two together.
true.
It's like World War eras.
Which you can,
And
in
it's
a
true.
way, right? You
I mean,
know?
yeah, you can. You really
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that is the basic timeline of the
Mhm.
old republic, of what we know from canon, which I sprinkled in some legends.
Yeah.
Basically, like
Mm.
5,000 years of warfare,
Mhm.
essentially mushed together. Which I always say, like, the whole High Republic got like 400 years worth of story to tell, and but Phase 3 is like probably only going to cover what, a year. So
Yeah,
it's
maybe.
like, what are you going to do for the Old Republic? Got 5,000 years of empty space.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
the original trilogy is what? I mean,
three
you got
years,
3 years. The
4,
prequels are 13. The
and there
sequel
were
trilogy
sequels.
is 1 year, yeah.
Yeah,
But it's the thing
I
is
still hate
we
that.
get the lens on the most decisive moments. And that's
Right.
why they're telling these stories, because saying this is the decisive moment that changed everything and led to everything else that happened. And so,
Well,
yeah.
not to get too tangenty again. We're getting tangenty this episode. I
Hey,
apologize.
no, no, it's good. It's all good.
But that's again what I'm curious about Acolyte, because, like, okay,
Yeah.
if these shows are supposed to tell us the most important things, then
Mhm.
by definition, Acolyte, which may be 100 years after Phase 3,
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure when in the timeline High Republic is supposed to be, but that probably says to me that no, this is like, you thought the Nile was like the big thing that changed all. No, we got one more big thing that's gonna change it all, and that's when
Yeah.
Acolyte comes in and does its
I
thing.
wonder, and we're kind of getting scabby. Try not to be.
I'm sorry.
Uh, what I wonder if the shows are different. I think the films, the Skywalker saga films,
Mhm.
are doing that, and the High Republic Publishing Initiative is doing that. These shows seem to be filling some things in, right, that are not as weighty, and that's fascinating to say, hey, Luminous authors, write this super decisive thing that I still maintain is how you get from point A to point B. How do you get from the glories of the Galactic Republic to Order 66? How does that even possible, right?
Interesting.
To the Jedi being these beacons of peace and justice in the galaxy. Too, yeah. Let's just round them up. They're traitors. Let them go. How do we get there? And so yeah, it's
I honestly hold the opposite opinion. I think Acolyte's gonna be that, because I think
we'll see. We'll see.
that's
I
what
just
the screen's for. Like, look at Mandoverse in a
that's I
lot
mean
of
that's the whole
ways.
medium question, right? Well, again, we can talk about Mandoverse, because I don't think that's actually what's happening in Mandoverse, but well, when we can talk about screen stuff, we'll talk about screen stuff.
We'll
Or
get
Silver
there.
Strike. We'll
But
get
yeah, hopefully. But yeah, I mean, I actually
yeah.
would disagree big time with that one.
And
I
again,
think
that's a medium message conversation.
eh,
The relative weight of things.
I mean,
So
it's true. But
yeah.
I mean, I always say screen will always have more weight than books and paper will ever. Trust me, we're
I,
always on the cutting room block.
well, I'll say what this is the screen will always have more money
Well, that too.
than the books, and so might as well. I'll give
Well,
you
that too.
that much, Joel. I'll give you that much for it. But
Well, that
anyway,
too. There's always gonna be more money on it. But yeah. So let's actually go into like mentions of the Old Republic in the canon. I've mentioned a few already. Plo Koon mentions something called the Old Republic during a battle in the
yeah.
Clone Wars, where
I
he
mean, the
probably
Obi-Wan was the first one. That is canon. A New Hope is canon. Just put
that's
it
not true.
on
Yeah, that's technically true. That's technically true. Um,
the
yeah. So yeah, the Old Republic, different kind of context in that case,
True.
but um, you know, uh, yeah. Um, so yeah, there's that. I think because yeah, I this is something that again we think about. The point. This is sort of where I like, again, I say be careful about overstepping the Nile thing, because the
Mhm.
Clone Wars is supposed to be the big war. This is
Yeah.
like, we haven't seen a war like this since that last one we fought against the Sith, where like everything was
Sure.
blowing up.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. No, I'm not. I want to claim that. Right. I claim My point is
Mm.
that the War Against the Nile was an essential step that makes the Clone Wars possible. But the Clone Wars is the greatest conflagration in the entire history of the galaxy, right?
Yeah, it's like
You know, it's not so, yeah,
it's World War One and
yeah,
two combined.
it's actually bigger than the Galactic Civil War in a way. You
Yeah,
know,
I think it's supposed to be. Yeah,
you know,
it's certainly more deadly.
it's just yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is like I don't even think
But then that there is your point being that there is at the end of the Old Republic this also massive conflagration. So anyway, good.
Now I didn't put this in the notes because I didn't technically count it
Mhm.
because there is a line in one of the old Clone Wars rough draft things. Remember
Yeah,
those? Remember from the Utapau arc, which was
yeah,
like connected to the Death Star? And they're like, why would Grievous need a big kyber crystal? Um, and Yoda basically goes like, he goes on a bit of a monologue of like, in times of old, our enemies of the dark side built incredible weapons. That were required kyber crystal. Like basically, yeah, the Sith had super weapons
yeah.
galore. In
Like
fact, there's
Malachor.
like Malachor. And in
Yeah.
fact, like there are. I wish I remembered where this came from. I know I've seen it somewhere.
Mhm.
I did my research. Where like the Death Star is inspired by ancient Sith tech.
Is it Catalyst, maybe?
Maybe I feel like it was a source book,
Okay.
but or one of the or somewhere. But like a source book says, like yeah, the Death Star is like inspired by the ancient Sith weapons of the time. Maybe it was Tarkin even or
Yeah.
something.
But that sounds about right. James Lucino doing something else. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, but
Sorry, anyway, keep going.
Catalyst or something Death Star related for sure.
Mm.
Of like, yeah, the Death Star, and even then the Death Star, like I think the idea is even like the Death Star paled in comparison to what the Sith were doing at the time
I mean,
in
it
terms
could
of
be
destruction.
a Force Awakens thing about the circular base.
Maybe.
It sounds like something they do, right? It sounds like something the Sith would do.
Oh yeah, totally, totally.
Yeah.
They
Kinda
Sith were
overkill.
like like look at some of the stuff Momin was trying to do in that
Right.
comic. It's Mustafar like,
Yeah.
uh, so yeah, so there's that reference there. Um, Korriban, obviously from the Clone Wars, Korriban,
Mhm.
actual direct reference. Darth Bane, another actual direct reference, and Bane is technically a Lucas creation,
Sure.
technically. So, because the idea of a Sith Lord who managed to get away and hide when the other Sith Lords killed each other, that's all Lucas's idea.
Mhm.
Just Legends kind of filled in like who the heck this Darth Bane guy was
Right.
and gave him a characterization in a trilogy. But the concept, the basic idea of Darth Bane, maybe even the name Bane itself, I think comes from Lucas' his works. Something called Cirque's Blade is mentioned in the High Republic.
Thurix Blade.
I know, which is a reference to Mitra Cirque, aka the Exile from Knights of the Old Republic 2.
Mhm.
Um, Light of the Jedi mentioned a bunch of times. Jedi versus Sith Wars. There's like signs of like I think there's even a council meeting where it's like, yeah, we had Jedi armies in the past, and Jedi got purged a couple times throughout its history. We always bounce back. We've always bounced back. Which
Mhm.
is references to all those old Republic stories where the Jedi get purged and then they come back and
Yeah.
then they get
So there's the
defeated.
answer to your question from before, right?
Yeah,
Is it one little thing or no? It's this really back and forth,
right.
chaotic topsy turvy time. So yeah.
Right. I am. Yeah, yeah. And I guess maybe to kind of go to the point about the Nile for a second, because we always go back
Yeah.
to this one.
Yeah.
I'm just not convinced that the Jedi's defeat is going to be as bad as like when
No,
they get
I
purged
wouldn't
by
say
the
that.
Sith.
I would never say that. All I mean is,
They might
uh,
get a black eye, but it's not going to be a gut
uh,
wound.
what I mean is, it's a black eye that is traumatic and gets them to really, really hunker down. Really, I mean, again, you're disagreeing with that because you said that they got to reverse it. Maybe,
Or hunker
I
down
just,
slower. Like,
I think they're gonna. It. I mean, that's the thing. Chris and I talking about on Friday. What did the Jedi fear, and how the Jedi fear. I mean, with the nameless and the leveler, they fear the Force, actually their connection to the Force turning on them with phase 2. In phase 1 and 3, I think it's they fear not being able to be the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy anymore. And so this is going to be uh, a big shock, a big not shot in the arm, the opposite of shot in the arm, kick in the knees, kick in the kneecaps, get them to say, "Oh, hold on a minute, we're not invincible anymore." So that's what I mean. But yeah, no, I'll never say it'll be the same type of defeat, because we have, like, is what we see again in the prequel trilogy, right? Is they're still out there, they're still involved. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are going to Naboo to be the Chancellor's representatives, right?
Right.
So that's still connected linearly to all the way back to where the Rusan Reformation is.
I mean, I
And
could go
so,
into
yeah,
a little bit if you want to know what
yeah.
that is. Do you want me to go into that with like in Legends and maybe kind of
Well, no, I mean that's okay. I mean, I
Okay.
have a sense of it. It's just there's
Okay.
a big
Reset.
defeat, and then they have a constitutional reform, or they write a new constitution, making sure there's more representative democracy, making sure core worlds or outer rim worlds or further
Right.
along worlds are more better represented. I mean, sort of what, yeah, not quite what. Oh, I mean, in a way, what the UN maybe is a
Kind
better parallel there. I
of.
mean, kind of what the U.S. Congress was trying to be. No taxation without representation. So let's everyone have representation. Okay.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
it is interesting how when every time a republic forms,
Hmm.
it's always kind of more to prevent like I've
Yeah.
been thinking
What
about
you're
this,
saying. Yeah. Well,
like
you
with
and
the
Red Leader were saying. Yeah.
yeah, but like even like the New Republic, like
Yeah.
Mothman made those decisions. People
Yes.
criticize those decisions, but in hindsight, I mean, would you blame her? She doesn't want the same thing to happen again. She
Right.
doesn't want a Sith Lord Palpatine to become the Chancellor and then get emergency powers and then
True.
consolidate.
Yeah. No, we get it. Anyway, there's a bunch more references if you want to
Right, we got more
go through.
references. More references. Apparently, there's some references in Tales of Light and Life. For Stormwall compared to a Jedi Sith War.
Yeah.
I have not read that book, so I'm going
So
to
I'll go into that. So
get go into it.
what the Stormwall is, and this is at the end of phase 1 into phase 3, is Markian is able to basically create. I don't quite know. They don't quite go into it yet,
Mhm.
but I think it's this disturbance in space where you can't fly through, you can't really navigate, and that there's a reference to say they haven't seen such, some big blockade of something since the Jedi Sith War, and so there, or a Jedi Sith War, and so maybe there's something similar where they able. That's the thing. The Sith were able to push the Jedi back and contain them in that way that they hadn't been able to since, or no one had been able to since. So that's that reference.
Okay, yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. That can make sense. Like,
I think, I mean, very early in phase 3, I think they go into the storm wall, and some characters are in behind the storm wall, which is also intriguing.
so is the Stormwall a blockade on the Jedi or the blockade on the Nile?
It's a Nile. I think it's like an artifice. I don't quite know. I think they go into, anyone who's watching or watching later in the comments want to help me out here. I think, like, early in phase 3, it seems like some sort of spatial distortion that the Nile create to prevent the Jedi and the Republic from interfering in there. So
Interesting, because
yeah,
so that actually would make sense because in Legends, I'm going to use a lot of Legends references.
yeah. I
That's
mean,
like
that's the thing,
uh,
is what we
the
know, right?
the most detailed part of in Legends during the last Great Sith War, which is the one with Darth Bane. I always
Mhm.
have to say that, and it always annoys me.
Yeah.
But where basically the Republic became like a rump state of the core worlds, and basically in the mid and outer rim, chaos. Just
Yeah.
Sith lords running around doing whatever they liked. So
And I
it's
think
like,
that's Markian's hope, right? That's
mhm,
his goal. He doesn't succeed, but
right.
yeah,
Right. Yeah, but yeah, that's it's kind of like fantasy where it's like, if you read Tolkien stuff, it's like you have like the Elven
true.
enclave, like the only good part of the world, and everywhere else it's like
Yeah.
Sauron or Morgoth are going all hectic, just running
Yeah.
wild, doing their thing of evil.
I mean, my
So
thought is similar to Mordor. I mean, what we
yeah,
see, of just there's this physical space that is impenetrable. Yeah.
right. So yeah. That. I wonder how big it is. That would be interesting to
Yeah.
know. How do we know how like big the space is, or is it like
I think there is. It does mention it. I just forget.
okay, that's fine. So there's that, and then we have a few Sith lords from the ancient past. We have Darth Koldos, who was like he's the Nemoidian Sith Lord. He's kind of in a no, he's a Duros. They always
Yeah.
get Duros and Nemoidian mixed up.
Phase Duros. Yeah. They're they're
Um,
they're like what different breeds of horse. I think they're different breeds of whatever. Sorry, go ahead.
I don't think a Nemoidian would like to hear you say that to them, my good sir.
Too bad. They're basically the
There,
same species. Come on.
yes.
Anyway, that's another tangent. Sorry, go ahead.
Right. Really, I mean, yeah, like, like, oh, he did some evil stuff back in the day. You got Dark Noctis, who's like a legend who found Exegol. She
Right.
had like Cis kingdoms under her belt and stuff. You
Mhm.
got, of course, Darth Crawl, who
Yeah.
who's like is he Trandoshan? Oh,
Death Crawl. Yeah, looks like a Trandoshan.
and apparently one of the
Um,
last 20 who went to the dark side and became full on Sith Lord.
yeah.
Um, I wonder if he was from the Old Republic era as well.
Well, yeah. I mean, if he's a Sith, that's
Yeah,
the thing. Is I think that to me is what marks the Old Republic. Really, it's the Rusan whatever thing, but it's really Bane
right.
because that Bane going into hiding initiates this 1,000 years of peace or 800 years of whatever 1,000 years of relative peace that
It sounds cooler.
allows the Republic to do what it can do.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. So with Crawl, and this goes back to backstory serving story. Um, so Crawl is a master Radaki. This is Wikipedia doing the forces work here. Um, he's one of the lost 20. He is one of the lost. Well, for Kiev, one of the lost 18, I guess. Yeah, one of the lost 18. And Kiev has a vision when she encounters the Drengir. She sees Darth
Okay.
Crawl, and saying, "Okay, this is almost." I wonder if almost to say, "Oh, leaving is possible as a master." Not that it's desirable necessarily, but it's interesting. If he is a Trandoshan, it doesn't quite say. I don't know if it says what species he is, um, but you know, uh, if he is a Trandoshan, it's an interesting contrast with Skier, who was Kiev's master. Who Skier, Trandoshans always have some dark edge to them. Even Skier has a bit of a dark edge to him. He does not succumb to the dark side. Crawl, of course, does. He kind of looks like, I don't know. I don't think they necessarily specify what species he
He
is.
looks Trandoshan because of the teeth, but maybe that's
Yeah,
just me.
but maybe, but to say for Kiev, here's a precedent. Not the precedent she wants. I don't think Kiev is ever going to fall to the dark side. But yeah,
Twist.
it's to say, okay, yeah, that um okay, but here's one of those that did, and when kind of if you're not careful, I don't know what the story point there is necessarily, but yeah, there's this vision of this Sith Lord who, yeah, it's just interesting that Keeve is the one who sees him.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but so you got that. I didn't put everything down because there's
Yeah,
probably a little bit more than I probably could have
yeah.
gone into. Like you got the Siths and the Grengear had a thing,
Hmm.
alliance that
True.
kind of went
They had
south.
a lot, yeah, lines that went south specifically. I mean,
You have
oh, the
the
Sith
Sith.
and the Ascendant
Yeah, Sith and Ascendant about to
also.
mention.
Yeah,
They had to kick those guys down because only one dark side group can be around here, buddy.
of course,
Uh
the Ascendant, they don't use the Force, these magnets, but that's a
yeah,
whole,
so
yeah.
that is
And then
kind
of
of
course
bait.
there's also Darth Momin. I
Okay,
just want to shout out Darth
oh,
Momin,
oh yeah,
a
Dark Moment.
guy who is the dark side artist who
Maverick.
Malachor. I don't know if there's any sort of historical import to him other than with Vader's castle, but
So far, no. He's
yeah.
just a sis who was weird. He was like
Yeah.
to the others. It's like you're weird. You're not
I
like the
mean,
rest of
highly
us.
important historically to the people on Mustafar.
Yeah, yeah.
In the
So
Mustafar.
yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, Moment. He's one of my
Yeah.
favorite. I hope he gets a book. I hope they just flesh out his
I
backstory
mean,
in a book.
his guy is writing all the stuff, so.
I know, and like give us a
He's
dark.
gonna show up again somehow,
I
somewhere.
hope. I hope to goodness yes, because I want that. I want that
Yeah,
to be at least an Old Republic story.
yeah.
But yeah, um, the Old Republic, we kind of have the basic. We're kind of flying here. We kind of have a basic understanding of the era, and there's a lot to cover as
Mhm.
well. I so we can talk about the future and like what it all means and whatnot, and like maybe before we get about the future, let's talk about like how do we explore an era that is like 5,000
Go.
years long?
It's still relevant.
Oh,
Still-
what?
No, it's still relevant. Keep going.
Okay, okay, good.
Playing with
You
the
know,
tickers here. Sorry, ignore me. Keep going.
okay, okay, okay. Um, because I do think, um,
Hmm.
I've always sort of because I think in some ways you did point out the way that maybe High Republic is doing it, which is when you tell us it's not about the era. I think it's about telling the pivotal parts of this
Mhm.
of a historical era.
Yeah,
Like, it's like, okay, what are the key important events that happened in this in the High Republic's case, 300 to 400 year time span, and now in the High Republic's case, a thousand, a 1,000 year time span. In Legends, it was interesting because they kind of sort of naturally built up. They kind of had, you can say they kind of had three kind of epochs. You
mhm.
had the Tale of the Jedi stuff, which was kind of early on.
Yeah.
Then you have what I call, and I think you call it too, the Revan saga, which is Old Republic, Night Republic 1, 2, and then the Old Republic
I mean, I
games.
can call it that. That's fine. I mean, everything Drew Karpyshyn's whole thing.
Well,
Yeah.
no, I don't think Drew Karpyshyn did the Old Republic MMO, but
Okay, fair enough. But like the Revan
the
thing.
Revan saga, because Old Republic 1, 2, and 3, well,
Mhm.
Old Republic is kind of
Yeah.
Revan cent. Well, Old Republic MMO gets a
Anyway,
little
I don't know.
weird, but
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that's Revan centric. And then the Darth Bane trilogy, which is 1,000 years later and talks about the tail end.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where, in some ways, maybe that's how you do it, where it's like,
Mhm.
okay, we get books, comics, video games, movies, whatever. You just kind of pick what you think are the most key highlights of the era, and you kind of tell a story from there.
Yeah.
Like, I would definitely tell what that last Jedi versus Sith war was like. That seems important.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously, they hope to tell a Dawn of the Jedi movie in the future, although that's not Old Republic, but that's certainly before
Yeah.
Phantom Menace.
It's still ancient history.
It's ancient history. That's important.
Mhm.
It connects to the wider Star Wars thing. Maybe you tell Maybe you could be inventive and just, hey, you got 5,000 years. What's like 10 years? Make up an era, make up a story, go full free, where it's like you don't have to worry about
Yeah.
connecting to a certain point of history. It's just like, hey, here's like a saga in itself. That lasted 10 years. And maybe you tell that first Jedi versus Sith schism split, because that's in
Mhm.
some form or another. Um, but that's how I would do it. I would kind of like, okay, I got 5,000 years to work with. Don't get too worked up on like needing to connect too much, because it's like, especially if
Sure.
you're gonna go something far back, because it's
It's
like,
way too far. Yeah. Like,
yeah, it's
yeah.
way too far. It's like, I talk about, I have my qualms like, well, probably got 300 years to go. We got like 5,000 years to
Yeah.
go. But so I'd say, okay, pick these important epochs. Why are they important? How are they going? Why are the repercussions going to be felt all the way to Phantom Menace,
Yeah.
Revenge of the Sith, or Rise of Skywalker, what have you? And then of course do the important things of characters, story, themes, etc., etc. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I would do it. But Matthew, you're just kind of thoughts. I'll let you talk.
Well, yeah, it's because what's bringing up is that question that I raised last week, and especially concerning chatting with Charles Soule about Undiscovered Country, the whole writing in other people's galaxies or whatever panel, whatever it's
Mhm.
called. How do you do lore? How do you do world building in Star Wars when it isn't really world building? The world is kind of built. It's lore, it's history, if you will. And I think what what High Republic has shown. What all of Star Wars has shown is it's a really interesting question. That's the thing about world building is what. Well, again, I think the primary thing with world building is what sort of character questions come out
Mhm.
of this circumstance that you create with your own imagination. And so with your own universe, you can say, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good example of, I guess probably Tolkien's the best example. What kind of character, or just the one that comes to mind, what kind of character story can you do when you have this evil ring that you have to go to this volcano to go chuck into a volcano and save the world? And that's actually how you save the world. And you're 2 feet tall in a world of people who are whatever, 6 feet tall. Um, what does that do? What kind of story, what kind of character, what kind of lessons for our world does that bring about through these characters?
Mhm.
What's interesting then is to say, even that this is from day one. Luke is this farm boy who is off in the corner of a galaxy, and he's the one who's meant to go and finds himself in the middle of this epic galactic civil war. What does that do? What does that do to his character? What kind of heroism might that bring out? Similarly, again, I think talking about, I keep bringing this up, but Bell and Keeve and Vern and
Mhm.
Reith and all these characters, are caught in this, these younger characters who step out and their masters push them out and say, you go help figure this thing out, this Nile thread out, um, this battle for the soul of what it means to be a Jedi. And that's the thing, is that the Nile do challenge with the Leveler and the Nameless and their political threat, their military threat, challenge what it means to be a Jedi and challenge the Jedi connection to the Force in ways that they hadn't experienced before. Challenge the Jedi ability to be guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy in ways they hadn't experienced for 800 years is the key. And so to say, okay, what sort of character questions does that bring out? What sort of heroism? How does that lead the Jedi to rely on non-Jedi
Mhm.
and connect with them? Bell's story in Tales of Light and Life is a beautiful example of him taking lessons from Loden, taking lessons from the Starlight Beacon disaster, and saying, okay, this is how I go forward and actually follow my own path. This is the Charles Soule story. This is the Bell story, uh, by the way. Similarly, yeah, this is how you do world building, how world building serves characters. You pick, yeah, like you're saying, that's it. You pick a historical moment.
Mhm.
You say, what's going to, I'm just kind of reiterating what you're saying, but it answers
Right.
the question of,
I would
look where
capture.
it lends up, where it needs to land up historically, but who is the interesting character in that moment?
Right.
And who is the interesting, what's so interesting about a character that can be a catalyst for that change? I mean, that's why this guy's so interesting. What's so interesting about this villain that makes him different than Palpatine, right? Is what about him? What about his grandma? It's so interesting, you know. So again,
Mhm.
it's that's going to be the question, and it's going to be what's different. Again, what's different from Palpatine? What makes Bane different from Palpatine? What makes whoever are the heroes different from Luke, different from Bell and Burry and them, different from Ray or Obi-Wan and Anakin? Um, I mean, Obi-Wan and Anakin's a great example of what kind of villainy, what kind of impossibility comes out when you're faced in that situation. And so, yeah, it that's going to continue. It's just that a different set of circumstances brings out a different set of historical circumstances, a different relationship between Jedi and Republic, a different relationship between Jedi and Sith and Republican Sith, and the Mandalorians being in the ascendancy as well. What kind of characters create the change that needs to happen in order for
Oh, uh-oh. Matthew? Oh, no. Is that microphone? Oh, no, his microphone went down. But yeah, I think you get a good point, Or, as I said before, make up a historical importance. Like, in terms of, like, the actual historical moments that I feel like Story Group or the powers that be have sort of sprinkled in, we kind of have, of course, the last Great Justice War, the Schism. Oh, you wanna keep going? Or
I was saying, am I good?
you're good, you're good, I can hear you. Okay, the last Great Justice War, the Schism, Tar Vizsla stuff is certainly you can put in there, that'd be something to expand upon.
Yeah.
Um,
What kind of character is Tar Vizsla?
yeah, that'd be
I
too.
want to know.
I want to know too.
Mhm.
And the Jedi versus Mandalorian wars. Would that be interesting to see a canon version of that? But also, again, maybe make something up if they want to. Like, what if the
Yeah.
author's like, you know what, we want a little bit more freedom than just having to recreate the stories of how the last Great Jedi versus Sith war. Let's go 3,000 years in the past, which is kind of around the Old Republic, Knights of the Old Republic game time.
Mhm.
And like, okay, this is our little area of Jedi versus Sith wars are happening. Let's make up some stuff.
Yeah.
That's like the High Republic as a thing wasn't really a thing because for a long time it's just okay. You have 1,000 years of peace,
Mhm.
and then they decide we're gonna make up something that happened in this 1,000 years of
Yeah.
peace before the Clone Wars, and why it's important.
Yeah.
But sorry, you lost your
Well,
microphone.
no, that's okay. And just say, well, the question is, I mean, here's the thing. Here's the thing about visions that I'm so intrigued by. I think that some people love. Maybe this is something we'll get at next week. But the thing that makes me less appealing is, this is the problem with Star Wars, and this is a limitation of Star Wars, but it's a limitation that they have to live with because it's also one of the great strengths of it is that we have this sort of history to it. And so if they're going to pick an era, it can't just be simply so they can do what they want. And, I mean, part of me hears the voice of saying, yes, be an artist, be creative, do whatever, and it doesn't have to matter for the future. But will Story Group be okay with that? Will Lucasfilm be okay with that? Will us on the Iron Cat? Well, you will be. Will I be good with saying, here's a little story that has nothing to do with anything, but it's Star Wars, so we'll tell. Like, might as well make it Willow in Star Wars, and that's. I know. I'm going back and forth on this. I get why people really would love that, and just to say
I
it doesn't
mean, is
matter
it
to
good?
canon.
Is it good? Did you read it? Like that's the thing. Like, are
Yeah,
you?
maybe
If you don't read it, then it's like, how can you not say it's
like
not good?
Phasma, like the Phasma novel. Does
That's
that really
canon.
have anything? I know, but does that really have anything to do with anything?
I
Other
mean, if you
than
like Phasma and you want to kind of get into your character,
I know, but it doesn't actually set up anything. Yeah, that's the Marvel problem. Yeah, maybe. So the intellectual, rational side of me is saying, go for it. Doesn't matter. Tell a good story. The kind of the emotional connection for me is part of the appeal. Is
I mean,
what I'm
if
getting at is it has to have some historical consequence in order for it to be worth investing the time to tell it at all.
I don't know. I mean, what if
Yeah.
George Lucas didn't go with making historical consequences? He just wanted to make a indie
Sure.
star film about himself as a space
Yeah,
Jedi, and
that's a good
then it
point.
exploded. It made $1 billion.
Yeah. So
um,
I'm probably wrong, but
I mean, what if Kathleen Kennedy tomorrow says, "Yeah, all that High Republic stuff's no longer canon. We don't count it. It's all we don't care."
well, I mean, what I'm getting at is to say, let's like close our eyes and pick a date: 3,284 BBY, and it's just set on this planet. I mean, they could say that. I think okay. I'm talking myself out of this. I'm talking myself into saying, let's just tell a random story. This is what Visions is, right? Just these stories of people interacting with the Force without any. It doesn't have to have anything to do with the Republic or the Jedi,
Actually,
or
there's a lot
maybe.
of stuff that has to do with the Jedi. Funnily enough, I think
But I'm
Vision's like most.
saying what they might do in the future. Does my question is, does it have to be historically significant or not? And my answer is, it doesn't have to be, but I want it to be. There's the answer, and
I
I'll
mean,
sit
then
with
you
that
make
one.
it up and make it historically significant. Like the High
Sure,
Republic didn't have to be historically significant. They just said, let's set it in between this 1,000 year period where the
I
Jedi were
think it does,
cool.
but
But
that's the
and
thing
then
we'll
they
go back and
decide.
forth on.
I mean, that's what they did. They made it up. that's what you
Yeah.
gotta do. You just gotta make it up. There is
Like
no
make up how it's historically significant.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Like, you know,
But I guess that, I mean, that's the thing about it being the end game of it giving the Jedi a bloody nose. Then thing I keep talking about, how giving the Jedi a bloody nose that gets them to bunker down a little more, or the habit or the possibility of them hunkering down more, that leads to Clone Wars.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
they have to make up that part.
True. Yeah.
Like, they don't have to, but they're going to.
Yeah.
That's how. I don't know. We have to wait and see.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my point of like, okay, well, we know there are like defined historical significant moments because they set those up,
Mhm.
but they can make up more stuff because that's fiction.
Yeah.
You know,
That's true.
uh, that is the fiction. Like I'm sure
Wait,
story group.
are we talking about a fictional universe here? Is that what we're
Oh,
talking about? What?
I thought Star Wars was real, and that we're just looking at it through the parental mirror of
Through the
these
wills, through
dimensions.
the wills.
I
See, I just
know.
talked myself out of what I was just saying before. I don't know. No, I'll sit with it. I'll sit with it. I'll say it doesn't have to be, but I like it when it is.
The thing about visions, though, which I
Yeah.
actually think is sort of more interesting, especially in those stories where like Jedi and Sith are in the story itself.
Mhm.
You know, that is sort of the thing of like, what really is preventing this from being quote unquote canon?
Yeah.
Really, like there's a story visions like Jedi and the Sith are fighting in the Sith
I mean,
wars, like
Wikipedia tries to make it into it, right?
I know,
They try to find
but
it.
it's
You
but in some ways also that is sort of the idea of like, well, that's probably the stories Luke is telling himself of like when he's reading, or either when he's like
Yeah.
hearing stories about, oh, I heard, there was once when a Jedi and a Sith fought on top of a mountain. They're like because there's thousands of years
Yeah.
of stories. I'm actually going to use Tolkien as kind of an example, kind of like a counter to not a counter, but it's kind
Yeah.
of an interesting kind of example here because you read the Silmarillion?
No, but I know what it is.
So the Silmarillion is like the creation of the world to the end of the First Age. It's
Like,
their old
it's an
republic.
anthology almost, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it is hundreds of thousands of years in terms of a timeline.
Right.
I don't know if it's hundreds of thousands, but you get the point. It's a
Yeah.
very, very, very long time. Hundreds of thousands of years, that could tell hundreds of thousands of stories, big, small. But the Silmarillion only decides to cover the big stuff, the big
Yeah.
battles, the important moments. The last war against Morgoth.
Mhm.
Not really character driven because Tolkien kind of writes in a very textbooky kind of style. But
Yeah.
you get the point. But I guess my point is, I guess maybe for canon, that is sort of
Mhm.
what they could do. It's like, okay, we're going to pick the historically significant stuff because
Yeah.
we also want to connect to our movie franchise, and then Visions can kind of be you're like the legendary story that kind of all happened somewhere in between the big. Actually, we have records. We
Yeah.
have actual records of the stuff going on and why
Mhm.
in our school textbooks this is important.
Mhm.
And then the Visions is like, well, the old lady from this planet heard the story of Sis and the Jedi fighting on a mountain.
Yeah. So, I mean, one thing I want to move into just quickly,
Oh yeah.
the thing about it, my theory, what do these references tell us about what they might do? And you have a take on this, so I'll let you go into that first, and then I'll respond.
Oh yeah. So my take is kind of a mix of
Like all the morsels and all the stuff we know in canon so far.
kind of
Good.
probably not as much as I think we like to deep dive ourselves into.
Yeah.
Like Revan being chanted by the cis exegol folks. That's just probably a fun Easter egg Adam Christopher got to sneak in because he's a Revan fan. And then other things like the Chiss being part of the Cis Empire. That's kind of more like, Tim Zahn just wants to keep the stuff from Legends that if you ain't broke, don't fix it kind of
Yeah.
mentality. I will say stuff like Darth Kaldoth,
Mhm. Yeah.
Crawl, and maybe
Called off.
Momin
Yeah.
have better chances of being in these things if they give the authors the go ahead, the green light to you get to work now in this era. I can totally see Charles Soule and those cats did do
Like,
something.
Called off thing is no Crawl is a Calvin Scott
Okay, so Kevin's well,
for sure.
Momin's
Because even in like the Wikipedia article, they seeded into Jedi Lost.
Mm.
Of course, about the Lost 20th, where Keith Trennis is seeded into, and then of course the Vision in the Kevin Scott comics. So yeah, and then
Right.
I mean, Caldoth. Where is Caldoth? Moment is definitely, of course, Charles Soule,
Oh
right?
yeah. So
Um, yeah,
so
sorry, keep going.
but in terms of like, there's a grand plan, story groups got it all figured out. I don't think that at all. And I think
Mm,
by the time we get to the old Republic era, is allowed to actually be touched in something, be it wherever it starts, I have no idea. Maybe they'll go High Republic and they'll do the High Republic thing again, or maybe they'll want us to do it with a movie, or maybe they did want to do it with a video game and make that Knights of the Old Republic remake more canonized. I don't know, but unless they do the Knights of the Old Republic but more canonized version, I still think they'll probably go for something very original and very kind of
mm,
do their own thing. Um, Depending on when they
yeah.
want to, what they allow the authors to touch. For one thing, will they give the authors the historically significant final Jedi versus Sith war, or are they like, hey, make up something historically significant, but like set it 3,000 years in the past or 2,000 years in the past
Mhm,
for us? Well, yeah, do that for us. We want to save this for the movie or something like that. I don't know, but outside of like author specific things, new
mhm.
things like Crawl and Callus and Moment, I think some of this is like, I don't expect them to do the new version of Meet Your Cyric or Revan anytime soon. Maybe Filoni would if he was given that time period. But outside of that, I kind of don't think. I think it will be more new than
Mm.
it will be just let's just redo the legend stuff again.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this is, this is just me speculating, me kind of fan casting here a little bit about the next publishing initiative.
Mhm.
We know, again, I've said this in different places. They're going to do something like High Republic again.
I hope so.
Um,
I hope so.
there it is going to likely be set earlier. I mean, they definitely will. I mean, it's so popular and so well done, and so popular. It's got to each High Republic novel has got to be making and selling more copies than any other Star Wars novel. Um, I wouldn't be
Interesting.
surprised. Yeah, it's the way, for somewhere why a Star Wars novel sells way more than another independent novel of the same author, right? It just, the name Star Wars and it being Star Wars has that massive oomph to
Oh
it.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So on a similar note, I mean, it being High Republic has a massive oomph to it that, yeah, I mean, Rise of the Red Blade is great. I'm sure I haven't read it yet, but from everything I heard, Shadow of the Sith is great. But it's a High Republic, so so they're going to do that again. I don't know if they're concretely planning anything. Again, this is me speculating. It's got to be more than nothing. Um,
I'm sure.
it does get at but well, I guess what I'm saying, there's got to be some things I think they're seeding in, or at least saying, at the very least saying, what Kevin Scott did with with what do I think? My brain is no. In Dooku Jedi Lost, with Keeve, with Crawl, with the phrase how, well, that by that point the phrase High Republic, the Luminous thing had been developed.
Right.
Um, Almost the thing with the Barrage Vow, kind of by accident, and then Charles is able to pick that up later. I think with Caldoth and with Crawl, and with these references to comparing to the Stormwall, especially now, when Tales of Light and Life, it is later. There are these two references in that book that relatively close to each other. I forget what the other one is. Oh yeah, there's a Darth Caldoth, and then also the Stormwall reference. They're in different stories. Yeah, I think they're just saying, so either they're seeding, or they're saying, yeah, well, what the first thing they're saying, of course, is here is backstory that helps the story at hand. Obviously, that's the first thing they're saying. But they're at the very least saying, hey, here's an idea. Why not? Here's an idea, Square Group. Here's an idea, some other author out there who thinks that's a cool idea. Why don't you spin it out, see what you think? Things like that. Or they're getting together and they're starting to talk about this. And there's a few things that kind of go back and forth with me is, yeah, they're coming together and starting to talk. High Republic was, Project Luminous was announced earlier. Like, it was in development for a few years, and then it really kicked off. There's a celebration coming up in 2
Mhm.
years. High Republic will be done. We'll want to know what the next thing is. Why, what if in Tokyo or just outside Tokyo, there's a panel, the next big thing. I mean, there's probably going to be a panel. It's called the next big thing in Lucasfilm. I'm pretty sure that's what it's going to be called. What if? What if that's it? What if it is set just before the 1,000 years? Now, to your point, however, two things I will say is the historical precedent. High Republic, it was this new thing. It was this thing that we couldn't see coming. We did not expect. Nobody saw it coming. That's part of the brilliance of it. Nobody knew they'd tell a story because Legends hadn't even told a story in this era. So, yeah, I mean that's kind of to your point of it being this wonderfully new creative thing that they were free to do what they wanted to do with. Is that yeah, but also what was I going to say? Yeah, the building into it. I do have this bridge back theory, and this is kind of my thing. Well, so the second thing I was going to say, that's what I was going to say, is what you were saying about paper and screen, and how yes, screen always leads. Screen is always here's the major thing. You can tell in a standalone novel, you can fill in some details and say, okay, how does this character go from point A to point C by telling us point B? You can do that, or point A to point B, tell us point A2 or whatever, right. That in a publishing initiative, you can do more. And that's the precedent they've set, is to say this, this whole collection, what, 50 something books or whatever, 30, I don't know how many there are, 30 or something books, can actually be, how do we get from this to this film or this TV show or whatever? I think more film, and that's a whole conversation we can get into hopefully next week. I think films are going to be films are more significant than the streaming series.
Oh yeah.
I think High Republic could be on par with. This is what I'm thinking is High Republic could be on par with the importance of streaming series.
I mean, sorry to interrupt just for a second, but I'll just say,
yeah,
I 100% with no hesitancy in my voice and my body believe that if Acolyte is successful, High Republic movie guaranteed.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, that I have no idea, but to say in terms of just a publishing initiative is that, and so to give them something, my bridge back theory. Here's my bridge back theory: is if one of the reasons they only said 200 years, as opposed to 1,000 years, supposed to then right then and there, is maybe we wouldn't have the sense of it being historically connected yet. We would have said, how does this fit? Like the sense I have with Visions, we want to know how it fits, and that's the kind of the unease. In Legends, that's what they sort of, maybe they didn't so much. They already jumped with Tales of the Jedi, but they had these things sort of in between, and that was already probably felt like a bit of a whiplash, a bit of a leap. Also, they didn't backdate the technology enough in Tales. I mean, that's the usual criticism, is why do these Republic troopers look like clone troopers, and why is hyperspace just as fine now as it was then, and whatever. With High Republic, they've built this bridge back into the old Republic, and what I mean there is, they've looked back and said, okay, here's how the Republic is now in the High Republic era. When the Jedi are in cahoots with the Republic really well, there is a threat. This is phase 1 and 2. There's this threat, but Lina So is really expanding outward and saying, we are all the Republic, and it being this golden age, and then going back a little further, 150 years further, and saying, okay, was a little rougher. The communications were a little tough. Chancellor Molo has to go out and kick a screwdriver and fix this comms beacon because Iram and Arano won't do it for him. But these Pathfinder teams that have to go out and explore, and I do wonder about your theory again, if there was this great collapse and this is still the build back. But maybe that's the thing, is it'll feel a little more connected. We have, if we have a Darth Krall story, or a story with Darth Krall as the big villain, that won't be out of nowhere all of a sudden anymore. That will be like, we'll have a sense of where this is from, how it relates. And so won't worry about all that. We'll just enjoy the story as is. Maybe that's the thing. It'll appeal to the thing I want, even if it's not what we need necessarily. But that's kind of my bridgeback theory. And then, to go 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years, that would still be too far. Again, with Legends, I guess it was okay. But with Canon, maybe they're being a lot more cautious and saying, okay, let's make the next publishing initiative just 800 years before phase one. It's what, 650 years before I can do math, before phase two, or whatever, that still feels connected in
Uh,
its own way, even while also giving themselves freedom to do their own thing. So that's my case for High Republic or Old Republic maybe being like the end of the Old Republic. Obviously, no, I don't think they'll get the Bane story, even if they did in Legends. The books will get the Bane story, but the big cataclysmic battle in Malachor and everything Filoni has planned out for that we know he does, but something in and around that or before that, again, that raises the question of when we'll actually get it. But will they announce it at Celebration Japan? I don't know. I mean, that's just my thought. And again, they're gathering together, they're chatting. The Luminous authors are they're saying High Republic shenanigans. Could it be Old Republic shenanigans? This is
mm,
entirely me speculating, me just saying, oh, this might be an interesting theory.
yeah.
Doing this fan theory thing. I could be right, could be wrong. I don't know.
Well, I mean, in terms of connections, in a weird way, and I again, sorry I'm doing this, but I have to because I think
Yeah,
it's the only evidence we have.
sure.
Dawn of the Jedi is going to take place 25,000 years
Yeah.
before A New Hope.
The biblical epic. It's not connected to anything. Yeah,
But
yeah.
it is
It is.
connected.
Yeah.
It is connected
I
because
know where you're going with
it's
this.
about
Keep
the
going.
Jedi. It's
Yeah.
about this is like the history. I mean, in some ways, this is the mystical start of Star Wars.
Mhm.
There's the connection. There is the through lines to where it all
Which you
starts.
said is Ray. The Ray film is about discovering that,
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's about
rediscovering that,
discovering that, but
or
it's
rediscovering some identity for the Jedi.
I would hope so. But
Yeah.
yeah. But then the Dawn of the Jedi is the founding of the Jedi. This is
Mhm.
the start of Star Wars in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. The origin of the mystical galaxy we know of.
Yeah.
So yeah, so
And that the
there's
Jedi. So I just want to clarify. It'll be the origin of the galaxy in the Force, and then the Jedi will be hopefully positioned as like a faithful um,
Defender.
defenders, receivers of that. The similar thing with Genesis. The Book of Genesis is about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and their descendants are the ones who are positioned as the faithful receivers of what the world is supposed to be. Hopefully, if the Jedi are considered the heroes of this, but
I'm
that's a
sure
whole
they
other,
will be.
yeah. So
But yeah, this is the origin of the Jedi. Essentially, that's why
mhm.
I call it Dawn of the Jedi.
Yeah,
I mean, to be fair, we don't know what Star Wars will look like when that movie ever comes out, if it ever comes out. But
sure,
that is sort of the little hint of okay, well, they do want to do a ancient past story,
yeah,
and that's how they make it. So it's not like we're just doing an ancient past story. It's no, like this is the historical significance. This is how it connects to the canon because this is
yeah.
the origin of the Jedi and everything we love about the Jedi.
So I guess there's different ways of making it connect than simply doing a bridge.
Oh yeah.
Just kind of what you're getting at.
Um.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Clearly they're going. They're going. They're
I mean, Tales of the Jedi. What I read the first half of Tales of the Jedi. It feels connected. It does.
well. That's good.
Also because it's big historical moments too.
Yeah. But you did to your bridge thing. Yeah. I mean I've always somewhat agreed with that myself.
Yeah.
Some of that is just because of the context of how Star Wars books were, where it's like George was like, okay, you can do post Endor stuff. I'm not doing that, but prequel era, this prequel thing, you ain't touching it. Do not touch. This is mine.
Yeah.
So that everyone's like, well, can we go further back? And they're like, okay, sure, you can do that.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of going forward and trying to make it more connect with the prequels eventually. And that's where you eventually get weird clone armor in the past, but that's a
Yeah.
whole other discussion. But yeah, you know, I, I, again, like I'm looking at it and I'm like, I mean, I always hate saying this. I know we kind of have to be careful, but it
Yeah.
really kind of depends on also what the powers that be
True.
want the films to touch, what they'll allow. You know, it's like they allowed High Republic to come. Although I've actually heard interesting that maybe the original proto High Republic before we got the Luminous thing actually may have been films that they wanted to spin off. And I
Mm.
remember like that was what Benioff and Weiss were going to do, but then that fell
Interesting.
through, so they decided we're going to do more. We'll start with books, and then we'll get
Yeah.
to TV shows with the Acolyte, and we hope that becomes a big thing. Um, so kind of almost like, okay, we'll go reverse then. Instead of bottom up, we'll go bottom up instead of top down like usual.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of it kind of also depends on like what do the powers that be want to have film touch or
Mhm.
focus on, and then what will they allow the novels to do. And I'm sure it's a gradual process. I'm sure it's just not like like they have like a reservation. It's like film book. I'm
Yeah.
sure it's a gradual, more complex process than that, with things falling through, coming to life, and etc. But yeah, it just will be interesting if the Old Republic does get an initiative. I mean, there's lots of time in that
True.
era to play with for it to not have an initiative. You could do 10 years in the Old Republic is like a drop of the 5 freaking thousand
Yeah.
years that a whole era covers.
Mhm.
So you know, like they can, and again, you make up the historical significance. You
True.
decide, okay, why is 3,652 to 3,649 BBY historically inaccurate, and then we find that out together because that's what writers do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, but I also do kind of, I've always somewhat agreed with your bridge theory to a certain point of like maybe more naturally building forwards and backwards
Mhm.
instead of just kind of leapfrogging all the way back and then leap in this kind of going forward, with I guess the exception of the Dawn of the Jedi movie, if that ever
Yeah.
happens.
I mean, that's what makes the Acolyte so fascinating, and the exception that proves the rule. But the thing that's like, yes, finally, I mean, that's what we were with the celebration panel. I'm so excited. Again, we're still, I know, actors get a good deal for the actors. We're close. We're close. Just to say,
Mhm.
that's the one precedent of paper leading screen. And Leslie Headland saying, "Yeah, I'm reading all these things, and I want it to connect." And we have Vernon there, and and so, yeah, I mean, I don't think that's going to happen with this again because of how significant, especially
Mhm.
the Bane thing is, and like that big Jedi Sith war at the end of the Old
Mhm.
Republic is.
Right.
But yeah, what if it is something else? That's
Uh,
true.
one thing I wanted to bring up, because you mentioned it, and I'll wrap up soon. I just forgot
Yeah.
you mentioned it, but I think this is important to think about as well, and maybe why they also want to tread with caution, or and not even tread with caution, just kind of think it through.
Mhm.
The Old Republic has connotations, at least in the fandom sense of Star Wars, in a way the High Republic never will. Not, I mean, now it does because High Republic is now the
Yeah.
success,
But
but
there was no precedent for it. So
there is
there's
precedent
really
for the Old Republic. This thumbnail we have in our video, it's all from the MMO game. That's so the Old Republic conjures ideas, images, and I wonder if the powers that be and the creative that be are trying to find a way to tread with caution. I mean, my advice would be forget what the online haters are going to say. Just go for it and take the plunge and
yeah.
deal with the aftermath later. But I do wonder if there is sort of the Old Republic has connotations. We have a version of this, and it's not like the post Endor era where
Mhm.
people at least sort of expected there had to be a change because there was going to be no way. But with the Old Republic, there was sort of like, well, you're even gently putting in characters like Revan. So you said they existed,
Yeah.
at least from a book perspective. I mean, I know when the films come, I don't think any of that. If there were ever any Old Republic movies, I don't think it would matter that much. But paper
Uh,
stuff and whatnot. I don't think like maybe
Well,
able to do a
Revan
Revan.
is so that's the thing, is Revan is so beloved. He's as beloved as Thrawn.
Well,
I think Revan's gonna
from a fan
matter in
perspective,
on screen,
I oh
you know?
dear, my cat's stuck. Oh dear.
No.
Uh-oh. Come on, girl.
Yeah, I mean, if Revan I mean, it depends on when they set those films, right?
Well,
Um,
yeah.
if Revan well, that's a great point, is how to navigate it. I mean, well, again, that's the precedent with Thrawn is, to say, what about Thrawn is in the books? What about Thrawn do the original Legends fans love, you fans love about this character? Let's bring that forward. Bring that in, and say, okay, especially with Rebels. Welcome back. We've all had issues today.
I've been listening in, don't
Yeah,
worry.
you with Rebels especially, it is probably more
Mhm.
consistent. With Revan, hopefully they're able to say, okay, let's, what is it about this character that people loved? If we have to write it, we have to tell a new story with him, but let's tell this new story in line with the character itself. When we had, and so, but that's the thing is, because they got to bring in, if they're bringing that character in, it has to have the connotations, the vibe, the feel. Maybe bring Drew Carpathian in, probably not. I don't know, but uh, again, tell a new story in that sense. Be like George, don't be like George. Be like George. Say whatever it is you thought the prequel era was going to be. This is the story I'm telling right now.
Yeah.
Be like George in that way.
Uh,
Just sorry.
yeah, I'll just comment on the Revan thing. I'm actually not that, unless Dave Filoni ever gets one of these stories. I'm actually
Which
not
he
that.
will.
I hope
Come
so.
on, come on. Well,
Maybe. I
he'll
mean,
get the Tar Vizsla.
I hope so. I mean, I'm sure he'll. I hope he makes more than one movie.
Yeah.
But unless Dave Filoni gets it, I'm actually not that confident Revan will actually be a major significant character. I actually think we kind of lucked out in Thrawn being significant
Right.
in canon, to be quite honest, because I think just Dave was just like the character enough, and I think he had his pull. Where,
Mm.
and this is something I always kind of have to remind people: Thrawn being beloved in fandom,
Mhm.
at least from a film perspective, like if this were books, and maybe this is a different situation, but Thrawn being beloved in fandom doesn't make for a general audience $1 billion movie that everyone wants to see. You're not going to
No.
sell a movie on Thrawn. It's like, I'll even go as far as to say
Mm.
this. And when everyone always says Old Republic's going to make big money, you make an Old Republic movie, big money, automatic winner. People don't
No.
know. Most people don't know what the Old Republic is. If you put it on a bus, the average Joe schmo doesn't like what the heck is that? He
Yeah.
probably knows what Luke Skywalker is. He probably at least kind of heard of like, oh yeah,
Which
Luke.
is all the point. Then tell whatever story you want. It's
Exactly.
fine.
That's I mean that does
You know,
lead to my point. It's
like
like,
I
yeah,
haven't read much of this myself, right? This legend stuff.
yeah.
I don't. It's not precious to me in that way either. The folks that is precious to, yeah. I mean, read those books. That's what we keep saying about legends. Read those books. Enjoy them. They're there for you to read. Um, you're not the majority anymore. I know that's a harsh
We've
thing to
never been the
say.
majority.
Never been the majority, but say there's a whole whackload of fans and hardcore Star Wars fans who will go with whatever story they tell.
Although
And
I
that's the
think
thing that there's. I mean, how popular is the sequel trilogy? How
right.
popular is the new canon, the new paper canon? It's so popular. They're not worried about what the stories. They maybe some of them enjoy it, right? I mean, the best example is someone like Catherine, who, or the folks who Legends Consortium celebrate those stories and enjoy the new ones too at the same time and be along the ride for what they're doing. Both and it's fine. It'll be okay. there
I,
are worse things happening in the world right now than that.
to be fair, when I
So,
said we're never the majority, I also include just people reading Star Wars books in general.
true.
So we
That
have to
is
be
true.
careful here. We're gonna blow
Yeah.
ourselves up in the face for later. But
Yeah. But I mean, I'm talking about like even just as a publishing initiative and having novels set there.
right. And
They'll
that's
still
why.
sell.
Oh, I mean, they'll sell because Star Wars is Star Wars for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, like for a big movie, it's like you got to market it in a way. It's like you can't just market on Old
Yeah.
Republic, Revan,
True.
$1 billion. I'm a genius. Like you
Here's
get.
a sorry. No, you go ahead.
you actually gotta give from the like if you want to make $1 billion movie, you got to get the average Joe Schmo who only goes to the movie once a year to
Yeah.
see this thing. And why do I want to see this thing? I don't know. I'm not going because
Cool
you got
trailer.
cool trailer and but like what the cool
That's it.
trailer selling me on? It's
Yeah.
like Revan. Like I don't know what that means.
I also wonder, and I wonder if this is true with Thrawn, with the
Mhm.
Thrawn novels, the canon novels, is if there are as many people who are, oh, these Legends novels are precious to me. Oh, I'm interested to see what different thing they do in canon. I wonder if as many folks who would be up in arms about having a new Revan story or a new whatever story, uh, many people up in arms are who love it. Are there'll be people who are, oh, yeah, this is fascinating. Let's try this again. Let's do this again. I love those things. Let's go for it. You know,
It would be interesting because Thrawn is the well, there was a couple of things with the Clone Wars, but I'm gonna use Thrawn. Thrawn is
yeah,
the only Legends character whose
yeah,
story we are retelling.
yeah.
We're not doing that with anybody else. Like
No,
we're
that's
not
true.
doing. We didn't bring in Marjay. We haven't brought in. Well, we almost brought in Revan with that Clone Wars thing, but that is so vague. It's like his story could
Yeah,
still
the
match
Obi
up.
Wan Anakin thing.
Yeah, and with Mortis, it was the Mortis thing.
Oh
He's
yeah,
gonna be in the
right.
Mortis arc, and Bane. Bane again is what a thing where it's like
Mhm,
his story more or less matches with Legends, and we haven't really retold it, so
mhm.
that doesn't really count. Thrawn's the only one where it's like, yeah, we have the Legend story,
Yeah.
but now we got this Ahsoka story when like you didn't,
Well, I mean, I'm talking about the Zahn novels, the canon novels.
well, that's the thing that Thrawn writes his novels be very Legends friendly,
Yeah,
so
that's true. That is true.
he's not really retelling
But
it.
to your point, there's only been one. I do think Revan could be the next one. That's another thing we're speculating here. Like, what if? What if the next publishing initiative or whatever is a Revan thing? I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe he's too big for paper now.
I think they would want to keep him to video games before they would,
Maybe, yeah,
or
that's
screen
true.
before they
Yeah,
put him in books. To be quite honest,
yeah, that's possible too.
I wouldn't want it either because I would rather
I
have
mean,
I'd
it's a
rather
similar thing, though, right? It's to say they're retelling, giving us a canon version, and I mean, I can still consider video games sort of paper canon anyway. So
well, but obviously,
there's that.
many more people have played those video games.
That's true too. That's true.
Guarantee you that.
Fair enough.
For sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sure there might be references. Like for me, like I'm okay with where Revan is now. Where it's like if they do a new story in the Old Republic, they're
Mhm.
like, remember 1,000 years ago when the Dark Lord Revan was our biggest enemy, and now we got to deal with this Lord guy.
Yeah.
That's what I would rather want because I
That's the
agree with
bridge
you.
back. There's the bridge back, right? Is to
Yeah.
say, give us a Darth Krall story
Mhm.
that's referring. I mean, that's what they did in Legend, right? I mean, Bane. This was a wild thing. I remember reading about this. I mean, it's not. It was a different. It's in a different order, but
Ouch.
just say you're reading the Darth Bane story first, and then you're reading Revan. Like I haven't read. I've read Darth Bane, a bit of Darth Bane. I haven't read Revan. Isn't there's one point where Revan had hid this holocron in a Sith temple, and Bane finds it?
Yeah,
I
he's
mean, that's
Bane Lord
almost a
forever.
reference. That could be a bridge back to some people. I know
Yeah.
that's not how it was intended, but
Oh
also the
yeah.
same author, Drew Carpation. So Edmonton, Alberta's, by the way, Drew Carpation. Sorry.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
You're not wrong. But yeah,
yeah,
that's. But no, I'm all for you. Where it's like, yeah, tell your own story, guys.
yeah,
Don't get worried about the video game people. Tell your own story. And like
yeah.
that's what I expect when we actually do the Last Jedi Sith Wars thing. It's like we'll just tell our own story. I don't even think we're gonna worry that much about Darth Bane. I think we'll just tell our own story. Like, yeah,
So
deal with that. Um,
the haters gonna hate, hate,
yeah,
hate.
you're gonna hate that. That's
Gotta
what
shake
you
it
gotta
off.
do.
Shake it off.
Well, hey, you know what? We have a Dawn of the Jedi story in Legends. There is I think it's a comic or a
It's a
book.
yeah, it's a comic book that I
Uh,
have that one that I have read, and it's brilliant.
and
Has Tython and Ashla and Boga and all that stuff.
and
Yeah,
unless James Mangold's a big fan of those things and secretly been a big fan of those things the whole time, I don't think he's gonna go with that. I think he's gonna do his own thing.
yeah, that's
Um,
true. It's
so
gonna be bigger because that's a bit of a smaller story too.
okay. But let me just
Mhm.
look at the notes to make sure. But yeah,
Oh yeah, we
um,
definitely got
yeah, I
it.
think we did it, everybody, and I think with that, tell your own. I'll just wrap up and say, tell your own stories. It's gonna be very interesting to see what they bring to the table. I think some seeds are just there because they know Old Republic is fun. People like it. Others like Moment and some of the original Sith Lords created its characters by the authors of High Republic. I'm sure they have bigger stories in their head. They'll want to try to get in if they ever are allowed to play in that
Yeah.
part of the sandbox. But yeah, be very curious to see. Um, and I'll be curious to see also, and maybe we can talk about this more next week, if how much paper cannon actually is affected by the strikes, especially because I do think as much as we like to see the paper and screen as separate things, they are in a symbiotic relationship. Symbiotic relationship, like in Phantom Menace. The
Yes.
Naboo and the Gungan. Like, I do think something there is an effect. It just might
Yeah.
not be as prevalent, but I think there's something there. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, we will see. Although I do hope when we get to Celebration, something big comes next. But yeah, that is my final thoughts.
That's a fascinating question to leave us on. That is a great point to wrap up. Again, good. Going the distance here over 2 hours. That's great. Thanks everyone for sticking around, for chiming in, for watching after the fact, listening after the fact. Let us know what you thought of our conversation tonight. Comment boxes below on all these socials, Underworld and Iron Cannon, right there. Please let us know. Give us a like and a share and subscribe to the channel. Yeah, Joel, where can they find you on the internet?
Well, you can find me at JID2021 on Twitter. You can also find me, of course, at the Ion Cannon Pod, although I'm not there as much. But you can always find me a lot on Discord with the Star Wars Underworld Discord server. Join us. We have game nights, movie nights, all sorts of fun. And we have sometimes get-togethers. Although maybe those get-togethers might not be happening soon if the strike ends. Please,
Who
please,
knows?
please,
But
please.
I mean, definitely again, the thing with Discord, chime in. Joel will chime in, uh, chatting away. Ben will chime in on different things. Yeah, it's been pretty good down there. That seems to be where you're mainly online nowadays, and the forums. But yeah, you seems to be on Discord plenty, which is great, and I'm happy that keeps going strong. You can follow me on Twitter at NEG45, Instagram Threads, and MNEG 1138. Not really on Threads, but whatever. I'll mostly right now tweeting about this person right here. 1989 Taylor's version, Matthew Nearbar Taylor version. Yes, it does mean she owns my Twitter account. I'm here for it. There we go. Yeah, of course, at the Iron Cannon, at Iron Cannon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Check me out there. Check me out on the Tractor Beam this Thursday at 12:15 with Mr. Chris Abbott. Check out our Phase 2 recap there. New York Comic Con recaps here on Underworld YouTube channel. Of course, we're on the Underworld Facebook, Underworld YouTube, Twitch, Iron Cannon Twitch, Underworld Twitch, Underworld Twitter, Iron Cannon Twitter, wherever you want to get your Spotify, Apple Podcasts, because I don't like sleep. No, I do like sleep. Spotify, Apple Podcasts.
We're everywhere.
We're everywhere as best we can. Yeah, check us out next week, as promised. Here's what we're actually talking about, guys. Star Wars as franchise fiction, what that means as a franchise, connecting to canon, but also paper screen relationship, but also what kind of real world perspectives that might bring as well.
Merchandising.
Merchandising, yeah,
Where the
Spaceballs
real
as
money from the movie is
you
made.
know, that's George Lucas's dream there a little bit. Yeah, so that should be as we've teed up this week. Great discussion next week. But until then, Joel, let's blow this thing and head home.